Chapter 21:10. Mr. Asakes and the others didn't lose control like the girl did. Although they were in low spirits, they didn't do anything uncontrollable. I didn't expect so many things to happen in such a short period of time. After waking up, Dooland and LeVar listened to Mr. Asakes's narration with complicated expressions. As for Principal DeLuc and the assistant of the mayor, who had been in a sickly state since they were in Domremy village, they didn't have a good impression of the mayor. After all, the two of them were lying on the ground all the time. I seem to have missed a lot of thrilling adventure stories. It seems like I'm really an unlucky person. DeLuc, you still have the mood to joke at a time like this? Mr. Asakes looked at his childhood playmate who seemed to have a bad fate with him. At least we should start to feel better, right? Whether it's for ourselves or for. DeLuc's eyes fell on the old TV, the revival of the Saint in 3 days. At this time, the morning news program of A Freedom City was replaced by the joint press conference of the 7 cities. These 7 cities were announcing the start of the Saint's Easter ceremony. The things we experienced are too strange, and there are too many questions. Mayor Dooland suddenly stood up and said, "But nothing is as important as Easter. Everyone, as the mayor of A Freedom City, I shouldn't stay in the Rose Mansion. I have to return to the City Hall. The people of A Freedom City need me the most right now. Let's discuss our matter in 3 days, or maybe we don't need to discuss it anymore." Mr. Asakes didn't stop Dooland. If he stopped him from returning to the City Hall, Dooland would definitely punch him with his iron fist. "If there's anything you can help with, just say the word," Mr. Asakes said at the end. Mayor Dooland said, 3 days later, "If you can help us pray for Easter, it will be the greatest help to us." Mr. Arthas only let out a slow sigh. "So." Principal DeLuc picked up his coat and stood up. "I should go back to the academy to take a look. If I neglect my duties at this time, I will probably be fired. Most of my stocks are in the academy. If I get fired, the losses will be a little scary." "You seem to be quite relaxed." Asakes suddenly glanced at DeLuc. "Perhaps it's because I'm not very focused to begin with." Principal DeLuc said faintly, "You know that I've never been very focused." It was a little secret of Dick Luke's. As his best friend and choral partner since young, Arthashes knew from a young age that this guy was capable of multitasking, or even multitasking. While praying, DeLuc was still able to divert his attention to think about how to skip classes and play or even other things. On the other hand, Mr. Asakes and Mr. DeLuc were like two extremes. The headmaster could easily multitask, but Mr. Asakes could never get a real response when he was single-minded. "I want to visit the teacher," Mr. Asakes suddenly said. "I think what you should do now is to keep an eye on the guests in the mansion." Before DeLuc left, he whispered to Arthashes, "Perhaps we should be careful of them." "You too." Asakes nodded and immediately said, Lily, send them out." The maid at the side quickly nodded in agreement. After DeLuc and Levi left, Mr. Asakes slowly breathed a sigh of relief. He sat on the sofa and poured himself a glass of water. "Lady Nan, after watching for so long, you don't plan to come out?" "You're quite perceptive." Miss Nan shrugged, but she had already walked out from behind. Mr. Asakes drank the water and said, "I can't feel it, but the mirror on the cabinet can reflect it." Nan Shaunan finally sat down. Mr. Asakes directly asked, "That Mr. Jacques hasn't woken up yet?" Nan Shaunan said, "There are many ways to wake him up. Even you can do it. Why ask me?" Mr. Arthas frowned and thought for a moment before saying, "According to what you said before when you violently knocked. Let us rest. Rose Mansion will switch to Dong Remy Village after midnight. How did you find out?" "We found it by accident," Lady Nan said casually. "It seems that even after experiencing some special things together, we still can't trust each other." Mr. Asakes sighed. "Trust is a luxury after all." Nan Shaunan blinked and smiled. I've already made an agreement with Deluc, Durand, and the others. We'll put this matter aside for now before Easter. Mr. Essex thought for a while and said, After all, there is nothing more important than Easter. I heard it. Nan Shaunan said indifferently, You don't have to tell me again. I didn't say it for you. Mr. Essex shook his head and said, I want to say it for Mr. Luo and Ms. Yu Yi. That was not the power of a human. At least, it was not the power that Essex knew. When he was in Dong Remy village, Jacques turned into an evil dragon, Durand and Laval mutated, the woman in black, and Ms. Yu Yi appeared in the end. Although he was blown away by the strong wind in the middle of the battle between Ms. Yu Yi and the woman in black, he fell into a coma in the house of a barber at the entrance of Dong Remy village. However, those shocking memories did not disappear because of this. You seem to be very afraid of Ms. Yu Yi? Nan Shaunan narrowed her eyes. Mr. Essex smiled bitterly and said, That lady always gives me a very dignified feeling. I can't help but respect her. Rest well. Nan Shaunan stood up at this time and said, You should be busy in the next few days. The entire Freedom City is probably like this. So if you have time, you should go and see Mr. Jacques. Otherwise, you might not have a chance to see him again. What do you mean? Nan Shaunan shrugged and said, You also know that in Freedom City, the founder of Rose Mansion, the real ancestor of your dark family, has passed away long ago. Isn't it strange that a person who has passed away is still alive in this era? He doesn't belong here. Sooner or later, he will return to where he belongs. Arthashis seemed to have understood something and nodded silently. Kay or Lily, you can drop me off here. In front of the mansion, Principal Deluc stopped walking. Levi's face was expressionless as he went to get the car. The last time they came to Rose Mansion with Durand, they used the excuse of being transferred to Dong Remy village. During this period of time, their car was still parked outside the mansion. Mr. Deluc, please take care. Ms. Maid nodded and said, It seems that it's quite chaotic outside. Be careful when you go back. Deluc said with a faint smile, I heard that you guys encountered a lot of dangerous things in Dongremy village. I think that even though it's still Holy Fall, the free city should still have some law and order, right? Besides, my title as the principal of the school should be enough to scare people. If it doesn't work, I still have Levi to take care of it. You should be able to squeeze out some time to run, right? Ms. Maid seemed to be amused by the words of this handsome principal, and she revealed a rare smile. I heard that Mr. Essex was a handsome boy from the Freedom City Academy in the same era as Mr. Deluc. Is this true? At this time, Mr. Essex couldn't make any jokes. Deluc suddenly warned, in the next few days, the investigation in the city should be more strict. The Easter ceremony needs as many believers as possible to participate. You may be summoned as well. Try to avoid it as much as possible. Don't go out if you can. Mr. Deluc, actually, Ms. Maid wanted to say something, but she stopped on second thought. What? Actually. Ms. Maid gritted her teeth and said, Mr. Deluc, I think I can pray now. My destiny system can now be activated. Does Mr. Essex know about this? Deluc thought for a while and asked. I didn't have time to tell Mr. Essex, Ms. Maid said. Mainly, I didn't find a chance. This is a good thing. Deluc laughed and said, Among all the bad news, this is the only good news that can make people feel relieved. Congratulations, Kay or Lily, you can finally walk on the streets of the Freedom City openly. Ms. Maid lowered her head and said, But don't you think it's strange? How come I can do it all of a sudden? Maybe it's not all of a sudden. Deluc said, This is probably related to the strange experience of the village. There are indeed too many questions about the village. But since this is a good thing for you, shouldn't you accept it? Contribute your strength to the Easter ceremony and become a true citizen of the Freedom City. In the near future, you might even have a chance to clear your ancestor's name. Can I really do it? Ms. Maid held her collar tightly and said with a trembling voice. Principal Deluxe smiled and gave the girl a hug. He said softly, "In my opinion, Kay Lily is no different from those holy girls who are about to step onto the altar. You are all so pure. We shouldn't determine a person's future based on their birth. If Mr. Assaches can also give me a hug, that would be great." The girl suddenly had such a thought. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She seemed to be intoxicated by the rose fragrance on the principal's body. "Kay Lily, are you interested in coming to my academy for a day trip?" Letting go of the girl, the principal asked with a smile. "What?" Ms. Maid was surprised. At this time? The people in the city are like components in an extremely precise clock. Each component has its fixed function. Deluxe smiled and said, "No matter what an individual does, most people's trajectories won't change. Although we will all be busy for Easter. It doesn't conflict with your visit to the academy. Anyway, you can already walk freely, right?" "But," the girl seemed to be moved, "if I go out, Mr. Assaches will be the only one left. It's like skipping class." The principal blinked and said, "Kay Lily, the joy of skipping class can only be understood after experiencing it for the first time. I've known Arthas for a long time, and he won't really get angry because of your mischievousness. Because I think he should also hope from the bottom of his heart that you can grow up normally like the other students in the academy. Of course, you can consider my words. If you need anything, call me." "I'll think about it. Go back." The principal nodded. "Assaches should need you at this time." The headlights of the car shone here and slowly drove over. Kalili watched as LeVar drove away from the mansion. She retracted her gaze and walked into the mansion with a hesitant expression. "Walking freely on the street in the academy, right? Academy or your mansion?" In the car, Laval held the steering wheel with both hands and looked forward, but he didn't rush to ask. "Go home first." The principal thought for a while and said, "I want to take a shower and change my clothes. Then, send me to Isabel's home." "Ms. Isabel?" Laval frowned as if he thought of something. The headmaster looked out of the window and said, "Holy Fall is such a big matter, but as the headmaster, I didn't immediately stabilize the situation. Instead, the board of directors worked together to support the overall situation. I think, am I now a loner?" "How do you know Ms. Isabel will support you?" Laval said expressionlessly. "She's my cousin in name after all." Principal Deluxe smiled casually. "If I step down, maybe she can't continue to be the main lecturer of the Holy Rite class." This isn't the road to my house?" "We're not going back to your house." Laval turned the steering wheel and said calmly, "This is the road to Ms. Isabel's house." The principal paused and then said coldly, "Laval, I heard you're very afraid of spiders and scorpions?" Laval's gaze froze in the rearview mirror. Then, he saw the principal in the back seat say with a smile, "When I just came out, I caught a big spider in the corner of the mansion. It's now behind your neck. You're a primary school student." "Really?" The car suddenly stopped. A figure quickly rushed out of the car, and then hurriedly took off his coat in a panic. Inside the car, the principal leaned against the window and looked at this scene with interest. "On your shoulder. On your shoulder. It's now behind your back. It's going to reach your waist. Come on, Laval." But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get rid of the spider on his body. Chapter 21:11. The syringe was slowly pulled out from the girl's arm. Just now, Miss Maid had injected enough sedative into the girl. In fact, the girl didn't wake up after she fell asleep because of Boss Luo's approach. "She probably likes the aura on your body, master." This was what Miss Maid said after glancing at the girl's hand, which had not loosened even now. Boss Luo suddenly said, "If I expand this aura to cover the entire Freedom City, the negative impact of Holy Fall on the environment will be eliminated immediately." Miss Maid was surprised, but she soon entered her thinking mode. As the shop owner, he could know any answer. Theoretically, he didn't need to ask anyone. However, nothing came without a price. Even the shop owner had to abide by the principle of exchange. There was no such thing as a free meal. However, Boss Luo could get what Miss Maid knew or what she inferred. Under normal circumstances, the answer Miss Maid could give would be infinitely close to the final answer or the final answer. It should be possible to eliminate it in a short period of time. Miss Maid pondered and said, however, the change in the magnetic field can only suppress it, not eliminate it completely. So, I guess that if Master leaves, the magnetic field will return to its original state. However, according to Miss Jenna's situation, the suppression effect is also infinitely great. Boss Luo smiled casually at this moment. Let's brainstorm. If I can make this magnetic field cover all the subworlds, even the void of the dimension, what kind of situation will it be? Miss Maid was a little surprised. Perhaps she had never thought of this question, or perhaps she didn't have time to set up such a proposition, but she soon had an answer in her heart. Master, according to my current observation, the existence of this magnetic field seems to be able to suppress all the effects caused by faith. Therefore, the chaos caused by faith will also be suppressed. Miss Maid said seriously, once the situation you hypothesized appears, then, even you don't dare to say the answer? Boss Luo began to play with Miss Maid's fingers again. I just think that there is no such need. Miss Maid shook her head. Once the hypothetical situation is established, it will inevitably lead to the disappearance of all the systems based on the belief system. Then, it's not just a kingdom of heaven. All systems built under the belief system. Boss Luo was deep in thought. What a terrifying power! Aren't you curious why it appeared on me? Why would I be curious? Boss Luo was stunned by Miss Maid's response. She said softly, even without such power, can't Master make this system disappear? Master, you can do it, but it's fine even if you don't have such power. Then its existence is just icing on the cake. To me, everything that happens to Master is a positive thing. Why should I care? Boss Luo opened his mouth and revealed a rare bitter smile. Hearing you say that, why do I feel like this is just a boring and useless idea of mine? How could that be? Miss Maid shook her head and said, isn't it a good thing to have more shops that give you extra abilities? Even though it may never come in handy. Never be useful. Boss Luo lowered his head and pondered. Reason told him that Yu Yi was right. Under the system of the shop, the independent royal power in his body was indeed unnecessary and useless. In fact, until now, Boss Luo himself couldn't find a use for it. It could only be used when the will of the altar descended. But the will of the altar didn't care about him for a long time. This even made Boss Luo have a strange idea subconsciously. That was, the will of the altar had completely thrown the shop to him, the prodigal son, to practice. It didn't matter even if he lost money, because if he didn't work hard in the shop, he would have to go home to inherit the inheritance while he was in deep thought. Miss Maid quietly pulled the girl's hand that was still grasping Boss Luo's hand, put it into the quilt, and covered the girl with the quilt as if nothing had happened. Boss Luo looked out of the window and asked curiously, "What's that?" Miss Maid glanced at it casually and said, "It's the parade before the Holy Maiden ceremony. This ceremony will even become the resurrection day of the sage. So it will be livelier than before." It wasn't just livelier. It was as if the entire of Freedom City had become a violently beating heart, and the surging sound of blood pumping could be heard at every moment. Boss Luo glanced at a huge and gorgeous flower car that slowly passed by on the street outside. At this moment, there was a well-dressed girl on the flower car, standing tall like a swan. Colorful flowers and firecrackers, the girl walked in the colorful sea. Seeing this, Boss Luo couldn't help but blink. So, the Holy Maiden ceremony is actually a beauty contest. It finally started. At this moment, the boss of Arthashes moved a stool to the slope outside Rose Mansion. He held a pair of binoculars in one hand. There was also a thermos box on the ground next to it. Inside it was iced soda. Next to him, the maid K. Lily was absent-mindedly making simple sandwiches. Next to her, Lady Nan was squinting. Flower car? Lady Nan's cheeks twitched a few times. That's right, the float. This year's float still doesn't have much novelty. Boss Asake said mysteriously. It's a pity that we haven't had the funds to sponsor the flower cars for the past few years. In the past, the flower cars sponsored by our mansion have never fallen out of the top 5. No. Nan Xiaonan immediately shook her head and said, Why is it a flower car? Why not a float? Mr. Asake said in surprise. The Holy Maiden ceremony and the parade of floats have always been one of the highlights of the past years. Although this ceremony will coincide with the Resurrection Day, the preparation of the floats was at least a few months ago. Some even took a whole year to prepare. If we cancel it, we will be challenging the tradition. Oh, this year's Holy Maiden candidate is very energetic. At this time, Mr. Asash's eyes were attracted by a girl wearing a white long hat and a backless sweater on a float filled with flowers. He clicked his tongue. Nan Xiaonan face-bombed and sat down with a sigh. I feel like this is a bit different from what I imagined. Tiwa. Well, although Freedom City Traveler's Guide mentioned the Holy Maiden ceremony, it only said that it was a very grand and important event in Freedom City. Lady Nan, you seem very surprised? K. Lily said in surprise. You don't know about the Holy Maiden ceremony. So, what is the Holy Maiden ceremony? Float parade, talent competition, fashion show. K. Lily looked at the girls on the float enviously. This is the dream of girls. After many rounds of selection, the most popular girl will be crowned as the Holy Maiden and take the crown and scepter from the previous Holy Maiden. In the following year, the newly born Holy Maiden will be the representative of the Holy Maiden and become the goodwill ambassador of Freedom City to visit the 7 capitals. Basically, the Holy Maiden who returned after completing the mission would have a good career development. Some of them became famous actresses, and some of them stepped into the music industry. Isn't this a King beauty pageant? Lady Nan roared. You call this the Holy Maiden ceremony? Yes, the Holy Maiden's favorite. K. Lily blinked and said, The Holy Maiden likes perfect girls, what's wrong with that? Being the Holy Maiden and being loved by the Holy Maiden also means becoming a perfect woman. This is the dream of many girls. Lady Nan felt that she needed to calm down. Boss Asakes, give me a bottle of soda, thank you, Chi. It was the sound of carbon dioxide breaking through the bottle cap. Actually, K. Lily, you don't need to be envious of them. If you can walk on the float, you will definitely be chosen as the Holy Maiden. Asake said seriously, at least within the top 3. Me? I can't. K. Lily immediately waved her hand in panic. How can I? The boss of Arthashis went directly behind Kalili and grabbed her arms with both hands. Then, he pulled her back, forcing the maid to straighten her back. Be more confident. In my eyes, Kalili is also very valuable. Ah! The maid immediately screamed like a frightened little mouse. She covered herself with both hands and quickly retreated. She ran back to the mansion's main entrance and hid outside the door. She cautiously poked her head out and said, Boss Arthasis, you've gone too far. I just gave a kind encouragement. Asake shrugged and immediately looked at Nan Xiaonan. Lady Nan too, I think you can also. Lady Nan subconsciously stuck out her chest and stomach and raised her chin. Asakes couldn't help patting his head embarrassedly. Oh, I forgot that only girls under 18 years old are allowed to participate in the Holy Maiden. It seems that I picked you up in Dongremi village? Nan Xiaonan pointed at herself. Ahahaha, Lady Nan, do you want some pickled cucumber? Asakes immediately said. I heard that pickled cucumber goes well with sandwiches. No. Lady Nan said with a cold snort, I don't like soft ones. At this moment, a black car slowly drove to the entrance of the Rose Mansion. The license plate indicated that this car came from the City Hall of the Freedom City. At this moment, a man slowly walked out of the carriage. "Aren't you?" When the Arthashis boss saw the man walking down, he couldn't help but frown. The man who got out of the car was the male assistant of City Master Durand. However, when the sun had just risen, Durand brought this assistant back to the City Hall in a hurry, intending to take charge of the overall situation. Unexpectedly, this male assistant came back to the Rose Mansion in less than half a day. The male assistant was very polite. He nodded with a smile. "Mr. Asakes, we meet again." "Yes, I'll be back soon." "Speaking of which," the Arthashis boss said seriously, "what's your name again?" "Donald Lee." The male assistant was stunned. "I introduced myself before." "No, you didn't," Asakes said seriously. The male assistant. Donald could only laugh. "I'm just a nobody. It's okay if Mr. Asakes doesn't remember. Let's talk about the purpose of my visit." "Why did Durand ask you to come to me?" Asakes nodded but frowned again. "Actually, I'm not here to look for you, Boss Arthashis," Donald said apologetically, "but is that Mr. Luo still in Rose Mansion? He wants to invite me to be a judge of the Holy Maiden ceremony?" In the lobby of Rose Mansion, Boss Luo opened the invitation letter that Donald gave him with both hands in surprise. The content was exactly the same as what Donald said. It was indeed an invitation letter from a judge. On the side, Asakes and Nan Xiaonan looked back and forth between Boss Luo and Donald. "Yes," Donald said seriously, "I hope Mr. Luo can attend this event on time. I'm also very interested in this Holy Maiden ceremony. It's my honor to be invited to this event." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "But why did you invite me?" "This is the City Master's idea," Donald said directly. "As for other things, maybe Mr. Luo can ask the City Master himself. Then, I look forward to your participation. I'll leave first." Boss Luo asked curiously, "Don't you need to wait for my response?" Donald said, "I'm just following the City Master's order to deliver the invitation letter and make sure it's in your hands. My mission is complete." As for the response, the City Master didn't have any strict requirements. "Then, please go back and tell City Master Durand that I'll attend the Holy Maiden ceremony on time," Boss Luo said with a smile. "I won't disturb you." Donald nodded. After sending Donald away, Asakes and Lady Nan looked back and forth between Boss Luo and the invitation letter. Boss Luo smiled and handed the invitation letter to Miss Maid. "It seems that this invitation letter is meant for you. I took the initiative to accept it for you." How could the master take the initiative to do something? The master could do whatever he or she wanted. The maid just smiled and accepted the invitation. "Then," she said softly, "since I'm going to be a judge, I need to prepare some suitable clothes. There are a few well-tailored clothing stores in the City of Freedom, but I don't know if they're still there after so long." "Do you want to go shopping?" Boss Luo suggested. Miss Maid nodded gladly. Then, the couple said that they would be back before dinner and went out. Asakes and Nan Xiaonan looked at each other again. "So, who can tell me what just happened?" the Arthashis boss asked with a solemn expression. Chapter 21:12. While the people in Rose Mansion were bored and gossiping about why Mr. Luo would attend the Holy Maiden ceremony as a judge, a certain person in the City Hall came to a quiet room with the same question. This person was the current City Lord of the City of Freedom, Mr. Durand. Even though he was the Castellan, the City of Freedom didn't have a hereditary system. He wasn't like the president of the City of Dawn, who was elected through an election. He wasn't like the Pope of the City of Blazing, who had been selected and groomed since a long time ago. The City Lord was chosen randomly. When the current City Lord passed away or couldn't handle the high-intensity work due to physical reasons, the City Lord would be appointed by the City of Freedom's saint. Or perhaps the saint appointed a City Lord today because of his preference, and 3 days later, he would appoint another city lord to replace him. In the history of the City of Freedom, such things had indeed happened before. However, the current city lord Durand was appointed by the sage after the previous city lord resigned. At that time, Mr. Durand was just a sales manager in a department store. After entering, Durand saw a young man in a white outfit standing beside the window, gazing into the distance, or rather, observing the current state of Freedom City. He respectfully approached the young man in white as if he was meeting the city lord of Freedom's saint. The angel of Blazing City was equivalent to the city lord of Freedom's saint. Moreover, the person in front of him was in existence similar to the president of the parliament even among the 7 capitals, even though there was no such thing as a parliament among the 7 capitals supremes. This was probably a consensus among the 7 capitals that wasn't directly stated. Of course, Durand knew this because he was one of the city lords of the 7 capitals. Today, such a supreme figure suddenly walked into his office. At that time, the city lord of Durand City was troubled by the current situation of the Freedom City. "My lord, I've followed your instructions and sent the invitation letter to Rose Mansion," Durand said. "According to Donald, who delivered the letter, that gentleman has agreed to attend the ceremony." Durand said after some deliberation, "According to the report from Donald, the gentleman has agreed to attend the ceremony." "Yes." The young man in white didn't turn around. After a casual response, he suddenly said, "Are you wondering why I invited such a person to participate in the important Holy Maiden ceremony?" Durand didn't deny it. As the castellan of a Freedom City, the guts on his shoulders were heavier than any of the other 7 city managers, especially during the day of resurrection of the saint. Even if the sage was wrong, he should correct it. This was one of the sentences engraved on Freedom Square. "Please tell me, my lord," the white-clothed youth said. "That person appeared as a judge. His opinion may ultimately affect the final result of the Holy Maiden ritual." "How is that possible?" Durand's city lord could not help but raise his head in shock. He immediately lowered his head again, afraid that he would blaspheme her. However, the white-clothed young man didn't mind and continued, "If a saintly maiden who is truly loved by that person appears in this ceremony, it might be a positive thing for the Freedom City and the entire Holy Light Kingdom." This time, Durand's city lord was not surprised but terrified. He raised his head again and looked at the Supreme in front of him in horror, unable to speak for a long time. "Have you forgotten what you just heard?" The white-clothed youth slowly turned around at this moment. Durand's city lord even saw a complicated expression on this white-clothed young man's face. Before Durand's city lord could react, his consciousness began to shatter and he felt dizzy. In the end, he vaguely heard the white-clothed young man's voice. "Perhaps I just want to find someone to talk to. You will forget all this." Durand's city lord's destiny system was paused, and his destiny log was pulled out with some slight changes. The white-clothed young man murmured, "A new saint will be born from the Holy Maiden. If everything goes well. If everything doesn't go well before the next deadline we are all sinners." However, he didn't say those words out loud. Afterward, Durand's city lord walked out of this room and began to passionately immerse himself in the Holy Maiden ritual. It was lunchtime when Principal DeLuc slowly came to Ms. Isabel's private residence in the middle of the mountain. As an advanced teacher of the Capital of Freedom Academy, and the main teacher of the Holy Maiden course, Ms. Isabel had always received a generous salary in the academy. The 2 girls welcomed Headmaster DeLuc into the villa. As for Levi, he stayed outside the door. Madame Isabel was rumored to not like adult males. Her attitude towards adult females was normal, and she especially liked young boys and young girls. She also hated adult males. If Levi wasn't wrong, one of the young girls who welcomed Principal DeLuc was a student of the academy, and one of them was even a boy. Young boys and girls who had never experienced anything were so pure that people loved them from the depths of their souls. This was Ms. Isabel's famous saying. Even though she was criticized in many ways, the capital of freedom was a very open-minded place. As long as her beliefs weren't biased, even if she was criticized, the people from the city hall wouldn't come looking for her. Moreover, this Ms. Isabel was born in the family of the mother of the saint. She even used the name of the mother of the saint as her own name. Of course, it wasn't strange for the descendants to have the same name as their ancestors. After all, there were many families that passed down this kind of thing. Soon, the two young girls brought Principal Deluc to the living room and sat him down. There was a big swimming pool in the courtyard outside the living room, and Ms. Isabel was swimming in the pool. She was swimming naked. Soon, Ms. Isabel slowly walked out of the pool. The third young girl took a clean white robe and put it on Ms. Isabel. Principal Deluc was staring intently at the tablet in his hand. Today, the stock price of the Academy plummeted, and the entire business circle of the capital of freedom was crying. Hearing Deluc's muttering, Ms. Isabel sat on the sofa opposite him and drank the hot coffee that the maid brought her. Then, she smiled and said, "So, you didn't come here to borrow money from me to save the market, right? With my meager salary? You have shares." Principal Deluc looked up and revealed a bright smile. "You have 11% of the Academy's shares." Ms. Isabel blinked and said, "That seems to be my dowry." "You can't get married, so you don't need to keep it. Can you lend it to me?" Principal Deluc said. "I really want to nail you to the Freedom Square," Ms. Isabel said expressionlessly. "Even if I die, I'll take you with me." Principal Deluc looked like he was furious, but he had a smile on his face. The three girls who were waiting on the side. Oh, there was a cute boy among them. They didn't understand what was going on. Ms. Isabel shook her head and said, "Such a big thing happened, but you didn't show up at this time. You even slowly came to my house. Tell me, should I call this serves you right?" "I have my reasons." Principal Deluc smiled bitterly and said, "I'm outside the signal area, and I can't contact you. Do you believe me?" "Of course," Ms. Isabel said casually. "Even a holy fall can happen, so there's nothing that can't be trusted. So, are you going to lend me money or not?" Teacher Isabel rolled her eyes. She then stared at Principal Deluc's face without saying a word. Principal Deluc was not afraid of being stared at all, so he did not mind at all. "Forget it." Ms. Isabel shook her head and said, "I can help you save the market this time, but not in the name of my family, but in my own name. But I have a condition. Tell me, whether I can do it or not. I'm not going to agree." "Don't talk nonsense." Ms. Isabel rolled her eyes again and said, "This time, I want you to help me add one more person to the Holy Maiden ceremony." Headmaster Deluc was stunned and said, "Cousin, to be honest, if it was before the parade started, I could help you cheat a little. But the parade has already started. At this time, how do you want me to help you add people in?" "You will find a way." Ms. Isabel smiled and said, "That's my only condition. It's up to you whether you agree or not." Principal Deluc couldn't help but frown. After thinking for a while, he said, "Why are you so insistent on adding another person?" Ms. Isabel smiled sweetly. She casually looked at the beautiful girls behind her and said, "Because I found that in my collection, at most, there are candidates for the Holy Maiden ceremony. There isn't a real Holy Maiden ceremony. I don't want to have regrets when I'm old. If this kind of words is spread out, you will be sent to court. Then, you can wait to go bankrupt." "My most respected and beloved cousin," Principal Deluc said passionately, "as your only relative, how can I let you have regrets in your life? So, can't you choose one from the list of holy maidens?" "I have someone else in mind." Ms. Isabel smiled and said, "I just found out. It's a cute little fellow." "Who?" "You just need to add another person for me." Ms. Isabel chuckled and said, "You don't need to care about anything else." Principal Deluc said, "Even if I add another person for you, this time's Holy Maiden ceremony won't be so simple. Those supreme beings will probably come in person." "What are you holding?" The invitation letter of the Holy Maiden Ceremonies judge. Principal DeLuc opened his mouth in surprise and said, "How did you, as the main lecturer of the Academy's Holy Ritual and an expert in the field of Holy Ritual, I was invited to be one of the judges. Is that something unbelievable?" Teacher Isabel smiled and said, "This is something that was decided a few months ago." Principal DeLuc shook his head and said, "As I said, those supreme beings will probably come in person. This time's Holy Maiden ceremony won't go as you wish." Ms. Isabel didn't want to talk nonsense and said simply, "See the guest out. Also, add this Mr. DeLuc to the list of forbidden visitors." So ruthless. Principal DeLuc cursed in his heart and said directly, "The results will be out in the afternoon at the earliest. But you should at least give me the participants' personal information." At this moment, a beautiful maid took out a document and placed it in front of Principal DeLuc. "You seem to have prepared this a long time ago?" Principal DeLuc didn't feel good about it. Ms. Isabel said, "Before 8 in the morning, your secretary called and said that she wanted to visit me. I don't know why you delayed it until now." Principal DeLuc squinted and glanced outside the window. In the end, he went home and took a shower. Principal DeLuc shook his head and opened the document. He took out the document and glanced at it. His expression changed slightly. "This is too big of a gamble? Why? Is there something that you're afraid of?" Ms. Isabel narrowed her eyes and said, "You weren't like this when you embezzled the Academy's funds, right? I'll probably be sent to the court with you." Principal DeLuc sighed and stood up. He put the document away and said, "Wait for my news." "I'll wait for your good news. We're in luck. This clothing store is still here." Ms. Maid brought Boss Luo to a clothing store at the end of the main business district. According to Ms. Maid, this store seemed to be more than 100 years old. "It seems to be the 7th generation." Ms. Maid glanced at the photos hanging in the clothing store and calculated the time, but it seems that the craftsmanship has been well inherited. There was probably something unique about this store that could get the praise of this picky Ms. Maid. Boss Luo didn't pay much attention to clothes. "Luo? Mr. Luo?" At this moment, a voice with a hint of surprise sounded behind the two of them. The two people in the store turned around at the same time and saw a young man walking forward quickly at this time. It was the young man who took the sightseeing bus together when they first arrived at the Free City, Dasher. "Hello, Mr. Dasher." Boss Luo smiled slightly. "I didn't expect to see you here again." "Yeah. I thought I was mistaken at first." The young Dasher seemed to be in a good mood. "Are you here to buy clothes?" "I don't think I have the skills to apply for a tailor here." Boss Luo smiled casually. Dasher was stunned and immediately reacted. "Mr. Luo, you're really humorous." "Mr. Dasher, you're here to buy clothes too?" Dasher nodded. "Yeah. Remia is about to participate in the Holy Maiden ceremony. We ordered a few sets of clothes here. I'm here today to see the progress. This store has always had clothes for the Holy Maiden ceremony. It's very popular. I don't know if our order has been completed." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Speaking of which, I seem to have promised to go to the ceremony to see you. Now it seems more and more exciting." "Ah, the owner is back," Dasher said quickly at this time. "Let's talk later." "I'm going to find the owner." "Go ahead." Boss Luo nodded slightly. In the clothing store, a woman in her 30s walked out with a tired face. Seeing this, Boss Luo and Ms. Maid looked at each other. Boss Luo smiled interestingly at this time. The owner of the clothing store looks like Ms. Assman. Chapter 21:13. "I'm sorry, there are too many orders recently. I can't handle it alone. Sorry to keep you waiting, Mr. Dasher." The owner of the clothing store looked apologetic. "I understand. After all, the situation now is really complicated." Dasher shook his head and expressed his understanding. "Miss Assman, you've worked hard these days." It was a very ordinary exchange between a merchant and a buyer. There was nothing special about it. Coincidentally or interestingly, Not only were their appearances very similar, even their names. The name of the female owner of the clothing store was also Asman. But in fact, the female owner of the clothing store was much younger. The village maid, Miss Asman, was in her 30s, almost 40 years old. And the one in front of him was probably in her early 20s. Boss Luo and Miss Maid had quietly come behind the young Dasher. "Who are these two?" "These two are my friends," the young man said heartily. "They also plan to order clothes. Miss Asman, it's more practical." The adult female owner hesitated at this time. "I may not plan to take any more jobs recently because there are too many orders on hand. If I really want to order clothes, I'm afraid I have to wait until 3 weeks after the Holy Maiden ceremony." "There are already so many orders?" Dasher was surprised. "Yes, because the orders for the Holy Maiden ceremony have to be delivered in these 2 days. Other orders can only be pushed back," Miss Asman said helplessly. Boss Luo smiled and said, "This also proves that there are many people who like the style of this shop." "Thank you for your compliment, sir." Miss Asman showed a beautiful smile. "I don't know what kind of clothes you want to order? If you don't mind, maybe I can recommend you to other tailors. They are also excellent." "We'll just look around," Boss Luo said. "If it's suitable, ready-made ones are also not a problem." Miss Asman thought for a while and said, "Sir, what style do you want?" "I plan to participate in a public event, so I want to choose some formal clothes." Miss Maid took over the words and pointed at a few sample designs in the lobby. "I don't know if there are other sizes. 2 of them have some finished sizes." Miss Asman thought for a while and said, "I can take them out for this gentleman to try. Please wait a moment. Mr. Dasher, please wait a moment. Miss Remia's clothes have just been finished." The young man was naturally happy at this moment. At this moment, Miss Asman walked into the shop again. Outside, Boss Luo was chatting with Daesu. "If that's the case, Miss Remia must have joined the parade today as well. I wonder which route they took. Perhaps we can take a look later." "It's a bit far," Dahir said apologetically. "Remia's parade route today is near the academy." Dahir sighed. "And she doesn't have a personal float." "Oh? Why?" Dahir said helplessly. "Remia's experience is a little shallow. She just entered the academy not long ago, so she doesn't have any sponsors. She can only share the free float provided by the academy with the other holy maidens." "What if she's a senior student? Because some of them participated in the last batch? Although they weren't selected, there will be sponsors this year. And some will prepare in advance. Holy Maiden ceremony? It's quite complicated." This was probably the most common thing. A brother and sister who came from the countryside to the metropolis? They had no one to rely on. Even if they were lucky enough to participate in the Holy Maiden ceremony, they were full of poverty. "But it doesn't matter." The young man quickly cheered up. "Basically, it's difficult for the first-year Holy Maiden to have any achievements. Remia also knows this. We're getting experience for the next Holy Maiden ceremony." Boss Luo suddenly said, "What about you, Mr. Dasher?" What about me?" Dasher's expression changed slightly. Boss Luo said, "I remember you said you wanted to be a member of the Saints Guard team. This will also be carried out during the Holy Maiden ceremony. Don't you need to prepare?" "It's temporarily cancelled this year." Dasher shook his head. Then he whispered, "Because of the latter part of the ceremony? It's prepared for Easter." "That's really a pity." Boss Luo smiled slightly. Dasher was stunned. "How can it be a pity, Mr. Luo? You can't say this casually. The security office's inspection today is very strict." Boss Luo didn't say anything. At this time, Miss Asman came out with a pile of clothes. Dasher quickly got the custom-made clothes. Then, he hurriedly left the clothing store with the excuse that he had to go back to report on his mission. Boss Luo was trying on clothes in the fitting room. Usually, it's all men waiting outside. Miss Asman chatted with Miss Maid. "You're the most perfect woman I've ever seen. It's a pity that I'm too busy with the orders on hand, or else I really hope I can sew one for you personally, especially a long dress. Miss, you're really suitable for a long dress. In the store? Is it only you, Miss Assman? Yes. Miss Assman nodded. It's a small business. Although I took over the clothing store from my father, the business is still very good. Business is still okay, but I can't handle it alone. Why don't you hire an apprentice? Few people are willing to learn this. Miss Assman shook her head and said, there are even fewer talented ones. Maybe I'm picky, so I haven't found a suitable one. Actually, the people in the family can also come out to help in the store, Miss Maid said casually. I'm the only one left in the family. Miss Assman smiled and said, a few years ago, my mother was also summoned and returned to the embrace of the Lord. Soon, Boss Luo had tried on several different sets of clothes. Sir, you're like this lady, a natural clothes hanger. Miss Assman said with an admiring gaze, you should walk on the stage of the spotlight. Women will scream for you. This is probably a terrible thing. Boss Luo smiled casually. At this moment, he was wearing the last set of clothes. Miss Maid came forward, tidied it up, and said decisively, this should be the best. Of course, it'll be better if the size of the cuffs can be adjusted slightly. If it's only a slight adjustment, it can be done quickly. Miss Assman probably didn't want to miss this business, maybe because it was a finished product. Then I'll have to trouble you. Miss Maid continued to make the decision. Boss Luo had no say in the matter of clothes. After Miss Assman took the clothes in to make some changes, Miss Maid and Boss Luo were choosing the buttons on the cuffs at the counter in the lobby. No relatives, I heard that Miss Assman is the only one left in the family. Miss Maid said casually, there's no problem with her age. She looks normal. She picked up a button, then picked up the boss' wrist and gestured. Probably because she was dissatisfied, she quickly put it back. Boss Luo looked at the plate full of buttons. He thought this Miss Maid might be able to last for a day. At this moment, a car slowly stopped outside the clothing store. The car door opened and a tall woman wearing sunglasses and a white woman's suit got out and walked into the clothing store. The woman took a look at the situation in the store. Her eyes paused on Boss Luo and Miss Maid for a while, and then she went straight into the space inside the clothing store. It seems that Miss Assman's business is really good. Boss Luo smiled casually. The sewing machine was passed down from her ancestors. Miss Assman was now making changes to the sleeves. Suddenly, Miss Assman seemed to remember something. She hurriedly stood up and ran to a cabinet at the side. She tiptoed and pulled out a photo album from a pile of books. She began to flip through. Soon, she seemed to have found the photo she was looking for. She took out the photo, put it on the table lamp, and looked at it carefully. This was an old photo passed down from one of her ancestors. It was yellowed, blurred, and could be called an antique. It's really similar, Miss Assman murmured. She would look at these old photos when she was free. Many of them were recorded by her ancestors, and some were left by customers. Occasionally, she could find inspiration from these old things. Today, she met a woman who she really wanted to make clothes for. Then, she found that this woman was very similar to the model in an old photo left by her ancestors. Miss Assman turned the photo over. There was a line of words written by her ancestors on the back. The incomparable Miss Jean. She softly read this line of words, her eyes blurred, and murmured, what kind of perfect woman can make our ancestors praise her like this? Praise what? At this moment, an uncoordinated voice interrupted Miss Assman's thoughts. A tall woman in a white suit walked in. The woman took off her sunglasses. Her deep blue eyes were as bright as sapphires. Miss Assman then put the photo away. Isabel? The tall woman in front of her was the teacher of the City of Freedom Academy, Ms. Isabel. The clothes I asked you to make 2 days ago, have you finished? Isabel directly sat down. For Miss Assman, Isabel had always been a domineering person. Hearing this, Miss Assman smiled bitterly. How could I dare to neglect your request? In order to fulfill your request, I've rejected the orders of several old customers. I'm going to be blamed. Isabel said casually. I told you, you can be my full-time tailor. It's much better than you guarding this old shop. Miss Assman shook her head. Isabel, I'm already an adult. You're special. Isabel narrowed her eyes. I like the clothes you make, just like how I liked you when you were young. And this love can be maintained forever. You can just come to me to make clothes. Miss Assman shrugged. I've already made the things you want. Wait for me, I'll get them for you. Wait, Isabel suddenly shouted. The two outside, are they your customers? Is there a problem? Miss Assman suddenly frowned. How old are they? Ms. Isabel asked directly. Don't think about it. Miss Assman shook her head. No matter how you look at them, they're all adults, right? Why did I only meet them now? Isabel sighed with pity. Time played a joke on me. Miss Assman seemed to be used to it, saying indifferently, Time plays a joke on you every day. There are so many beautiful boys and girls in the world. Can you really like all of them? I'll increase the rent tomorrow, okay? Isabel suddenly smiled. You're really... Miss Assman sighed helplessly. Evil capitalists. This clothing store was under Isabel's name. Not only that, over 60% of this entire street was under Isabel's name. Not long after, Miss Assman took out some packaged clothes. At this moment, Isabel picked up the dress that was being modified and tried it on. She stood in front of the mirror, swaying her body. This dress is not bad. The guest outside asked for this dress. Miss Assman glared at him. I didn't say I wanted it. Isabel chuckled, her eyes burning as she looked at Miss Assman. I don't know why, but every time I wear the clothes you sew, I feel like I've become you. Miss Assman was startled. Isabel circled behind Miss Assman, her hands gently pressing down on her shoulders. Isabel was really tall, taller than Miss Assman by half a head. I've become you, or as if you're beside me. Isabel gently pressed her cheek against Miss Assman's face, looking at the two reflections in the mirror. Miss Assman's breathing gradually became heavy. A voice whispered in her ear, actually, a mature Assman is also very attractive. As arrogant as a swan. A woman in a white lady's suit walked out slowly with a bag of clothes. She walked straight out of the store, got into the car and left. After a while, Miss Assman hurriedly walked out with the clothes in her hands. Perhaps it was because of the high temperature in the room. Miss Assman's face was a little red, her hair and fair neck were a little damp. Sorry, a regular customer just came. Miss Assman said apologetically, Sir, I've finished altering your clothes. Do you want to try it again? No need. Miss Servant Girl said coldly, I don't want this dress. I just want this button. Miss Assman was stunned, not knowing what to do. This is the compensation for the loss of time, please accept it. Miss Servant Girl threw out a crystal card. I'm very sorry to disturb your time, Miss Assman. Crystal card. It was the wish crystal card of the petitioner. Looking at the young lady's gaze, Miss Assman suddenly felt her heart tremble. She was so stunned that she didn't dare to speak. From the faint flowing light, the amount on it was probably enough to buy a whole clothing store. Miss Assman was even more at a loss now. But Miss Maid and Boss Luo had already paid the compensation. They said goodbye and left directly. Miss Assman sat alone in the store, looking at the crystal card in her hand in a daze. The amount inside was more than she had imagined, a lot more. Sigh, why did she leave? I really want to make clothes for her. Miss, where are we going now? On the way, the driver looked at the rearview mirror, asking Miss Isabel in the back seat. The driver was also a beautiful girl. Isabel was about to speak. Black butterfly? The beautiful girl driver was suddenly shocked at this moment. Bang, the car's tires suddenly burst, and then the car lost its direction. In panic, the beautiful girl driver only had time to step on the brake. However, in order to avoid the following car, the car finally lost control, crashing into the water pump on the side of the road. Bang! The front of the car was directly destroyed, but thanks to the airbag, the two people in the car were not in danger. Isabel climbed out of the car awkwardly, but the water pump was spraying crazily at this moment. Just like a torrential rain, Isabel, who was in a sorry state, was instantly drenched. She became even more sorry, like a drowned rat. It's really bad luck. Isabel looked at the predicament in front of her, not knowing what to do. Chapter 21:14. Perhaps it was because of the parade, all the officers in the public security department had been mobilized. They were ready to deal with special matters at any time. Very soon, people arrived at the scene of the car accident. Ms. Isabel was sitting beside a flower trough on the side of the road with a blanket draped over her shoulders. The beautiful female driver was explaining the procedure to the officers of the security office. The car was just ordered from another area, and the mileage was only about 7,000 kilometers. However, judging from the extent of the crash, the engine was probably beyond saving. The tire suddenly burst, causing the car to crash into the water pump on the side of the road. Fortunately, there were no casualties in the accident. It was just a scare. Black butterfly? Isabel frowned when she heard the beautiful female driver mention that she was slightly distracted by a butterfly. In many legends, black butterflies often appeared with death and misfortune. However, it was hard to believe that a butterfly could cause a car tire to burst. Is it because I'm unlucky today? Isabel thought to herself. I'm indeed unlucky. Nothing good ever happens when the principal visits me. The car is going to be scrapped. What a pity. Passerby. A passerby who was also sitting on the edge of the flower trough and looking at the scene of the accident sighed. Hearing this, Isabel casually turned her head and looked over. The passerby stood up and walked into the crowd with his back facing her. Soon, he disappeared. On the seat next to her there was a small document bag. When did this person sit down? Isabel subconsciously frowned. She picked up the document bag that was left aside and opened it. She glanced at the document inside. She quickly put the document back into the bag with a calm expression. At this time, another car stopped at the side. Another beautiful driver got out of the car. She was here to pick up Isabel. As the official heir of the Mother of Saints, she owned 11% of the shares of the City of Freedom Academy. She even owned many commercial areas in City of Freedom. Of course, she had more than one car at home. Miss, do you want to go home first? You're wet. The beautiful driver turned around and asked. There's no need. Let's head straight to the academy. Isabel said calmly. There are also clothes for me to change into in the dormitory. Also, I have some clothes that I want to let others try on. The small incident by the roadside did not dampen the enthusiasm of the people in the city for the Holy Maiden Candidates Float Parade. This city would continue to be lively until late into the night. Lang, who do you think will become the Holy Maiden in the end? On a balcony of the saint's residence in the Freedom City, two high-level angels were leaning against the railing and looking at the bustling city below. I'm afraid only the utmost beings would know the answer to this. In the face of Angel Jarabi's inquiry, Angel Londo seemed to be somewhat absent-minded as he responded. Angel Jarabi glanced at Angel Londo and suddenly asked, What are you eating? Me? Langdo was taken aback. He smacked his lips and said, Oh, it's nothing. Just some candy. Candy? Angel Jarabi frowned. I remember that you don't like sweets. Have you been eating them recently? What was that smell? Give me some to try. Angel Londo casually reached into his pocket. Then, he shook his head and said, I don't think I have any left. Angel Jarabi shook his head again and was about to say something. However, when he heard footsteps behind him, his expression immediately became serious. At this moment, the white-clothed young man and John were slowly walking over. The two high-level angels left the balcony at the same time. They gave up their positions and waited on the side. The white-clothed young man and John were also looking down at the city, but they wanted to see more. As the supreme beings of the Holy Light Kingdom, they could see that the entire of Freedom City was releasing a steady stream of wish. Belief was an invisible force. This power was gathering in the sky above the city of freedom. These beliefs? They were prepared for the resurrection day. Only those born from people's beliefs? That's the most suitable for them. John said softly, according to the current progress, we should be able to give birth to a qualified saint in the end. Just qualified isn't enough. The white-clothed young man shook his head and said, we need someone good enough. John was silent for a moment. He recalled the words the white-clothed young man had asked him to stay behind and talk to him. I met a person today. You really invited that person to be a judge? John couldn't help but ask. This is the best plan. At least, that's what it looks like for now. The white-clothed young man nodded. John exhaled slowly and said, I know what you want to do. Pick out the girl that person likes and make her a saintess? You can even make her a new saint. Then, at the very least, when the next deadline comes, we have enough chips in our hands, don't we? Repeat what you did last time. The white-clothed young man said calmly, the Freedom City has already lost its true owner? How many new saints do you want to create? As many as you can create. John sighed and said, in a sense you're already making a deal with the devil. The whole kingdom of heaven? Theoretically, it was born on the basis of such a sinful deal, the white-clothed young man said calmly. John thought for a moment and said, perhaps I can use another identity to descend and meet the new owner. No need. The white-clothed young man shook his head and said, I don't want too many people to know about Father for now. Although the thrones of the transcendence are ancient gods, they can't easily invade the kingdom of heaven's holy light. Moreover, it happened so suddenly. Although their ultimate goal is to bring Noah out, Noah was placed in the Garden of Eden. With the holy light left by Father, it's naturally impossible for him to communicate with the outside world. John couldn't help but frown. You already have a suspect? The white-clothed young man said softly, I don't want to have a suspect. John shook his head. He looked at the situation in the Freedom City, and said coldly, actually, if you want to find the most suitable person to inherit the will of the saint, you should choose from the saint's father and the saint's mother. Unfortunately, the white-clothed young man said faintly, what should be inherited is the will, not the so-called bloodline. Moreover, the so-called bloodline has long become dispensable on the path of unification. Shaking his head, the white-clothed young man said, it seems like Maria still can't come. John said, without Father's official permission, how can she walk out of the monastery? The white-clothed young man nodded and then turned into a beam of light that shot toward the sky, heading to the place where the huge faith gathered. In the next instant, John followed closely behind. A faith of this scale couldn't be allowed to form naturally. It needed extreme care to stabilize and blossom in the right direction. At this moment, the supreme beings were all trying their best to protect this huge flower of faith, and they couldn't make any mistakes. At this moment, Angel Londo and Angel Grab looked at each other. Angel Grab said, let's go see the managers of the 7 capitals and see how they are doing. Why haven't you finished eating the candy yet? Because it's hard candy? Angel Grab shook her head and left first. Holy Maiden's backless sweater is on sale. Please support the contestant of number 7. Flat breasts are super righteous. People were shouting and yelling. People crowded in this city as if it was an unprecedented carnival. On the huge floats, the girls were being cheered by the people. Did you have a floats parade when you were here? In the crowd, Boss Luo asked curiously while eating a hot dog bought from a roadside snack stall. After they came out of Ms. Assman's clothing store, they didn't continue to shop for dresses. Ms. Maid said that she would rather make one herself. Boss Luo wasn't surprised by this decision since Ms. Maid's forehead was almost engraved with the word omnipotent. It's probably that guy's idea, Ms. Maid said indifferently. He's really capricious. That guy. Of course, she was referring to the guy who was nailed to death on Freedom Square. "There's a little guy over there." Boss Luo suddenly signaled with his eyes. He could always see something special in the crowd. Ms. Maid immediately looked over. In front of a bread shop on the bustling street, the owner and staff of the bread shop were watching the bustling scene in front of the door. Behind them, a small hand was quietly reaching for the bread in the discount section. The discounted bread was bought one by one. It was probably enough to fill a big bag. Only then did the owner of the small hand stop. Then, he quickly ran into the alley next to him. It's said that the lightest punishment for theft is detention. If it's serious, it's possible to be burned at the stake. Suddenly, the voice appeared in the alley. It appeared in the ears of the owner of the small hand. The owner of the small hand was startled and raised her head, only to see two figures almost colliding with each other. The owner of the small hand couldn't stop her body from leaning forward to stabilize her body. But the big bag of bread was soon spilled on the ground, and the owner of the small hand hurriedly picked it up. "Here." In the panic, the voice sounded again. The owner of the small hand raised her head, and the first thing she saw was a gentle smile. Boss Luo picked up a piece of bread, wiping it with a handkerchief and sending it to the owner of the small hand. "It's said that the food that falls on the ground won't be dirty if you pick it up immediately. Although there's no evidence." "Ah!" The owner of the small hand let out a scream. The child was wearing a big hat. After the scream, the child immediately pulled her hat with both hands, squatting on the ground and saying in horror, "Kelly is not a bad child, don't send Kelly to detention. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Kelly is too hungry. Can you finish so much bread by yourself?" Boss Luo asked with a smile. The owner of the small hand. Kelly pulled her hat a little uneasily, whispering, "And Diana and others." Saying this, the child called Kelly through the bag to Boss Luo, then turned around and ran away. Because of the advantage of height, Kelly drilled into a corner of the alley. There was a hole in the corner, and she quickly climbed to the other side of the wall. "Is it the child who can't pray?" Boss Luo glanced at Miss Maid and asked. Miss Maid said, "It's the child whose destiny system hasn't been activated." Boss Luo thought for a while, squatting down to pick up the discarded bread on the ground, saying, "How much willpower is needed here?" The owner of the bakery watched the commotion for a while and decided to check out the baked bread. However, he discovered that a crystal card had appeared on the counter of the discount section. He didn't know when it had appeared. "It's a petitioner crystal card. Even if you buy my store, there will be more. It should be sent to the public security office. It must be lost by the bystanders." The owner of the bread shop didn't seem to care about the missing bread on the counter of the discount area. Today, the City of Freedom Academy was unusually quiet. The academy didn't arrange any classes for the past few days, and most of the students went out to watch the parade. Of course, there were also the Holy Maiden Fan Club and other organizations that they supported. The students were always full of enthusiasm. They heard that the principal came back today, and immediately held a board meeting. Many school directors came, and they didn't know the current situation of the meeting. In the male dormitory, Dasher, who had just bought some clothes from the clothing store, sat in front of the table alone, looking a little confused. "I don't know if Remia performed well." Looking at the clothes spread out on the table, Dasher frowned. Of course, the clothes were all good, and he couldn't be picky about the design and workmanship. But Dasher felt that the clothes were too revealing. There was a knock on the door. Dashio, who had a heavy load on his mind, was startled. He hurriedly stood up and opened the door to the dormitory. What entered his eyes was a mature and alluring body, and a smile that seemed to emit boundless attraction. This was probably the type of woman who had seductive eyes. "Ms. Isabel." The young man didn't dare to look into her eyes and hurriedly lowered his head. "Aren't you going to invite me in? Please come in." After Ms. Isabel entered the room, Dasher nervously poked his head out. Seeing that there was no one else in the corridor, he hurriedly closed the door. After entering the room, Ms. Isabel directly sat down. She looked at the clothes on the table and said with a chuckle, "It seems that these are all prepared for Remia." "Yes. Yes, I just brought them back." "Then what about yours?" Ms. Isabel suddenly asked. Dasher stood in front of the door, not knowing what to do. He didn't dare to get close to the door. He lowered his head and said, "Ms. Isabel, I still decided." Before the young man could finish his words, Ms. Isabel directly said, "I knew you didn't take it. I brought it for you. Hey, Dasher, don't you want to wear it and let me see?" The young man gritted his teeth and suddenly raised his head. That kind of thing, I don't want to do it again." After saying that, he opened the door and ran out as if he was escaping. Chapter 21:15. Pulling the hem of her skirt unnaturally, the girl lowered her head and walked slowly and anxiously in the campus, walking side by side with Teacher Isabel. "I shouldn't have run back to my room. I knew that once I went back, I wouldn't have any reason to refuse." Girl's mood was very complicated. If you can't walk at this level, it will be very difficult for you to walk later. Teacher Isabel's voice suddenly sounded in Girl's ears. Girl even felt her earlobe being gently bitten. It made her scalp tingle as if she got an electric shock, and it was quickly draining Girl's strength. "Until the evening, your task is to walk around the campus in this state." Teacher Isabel squinted her eyes and smiled. "Don't hide on purpose. Walk openly. Also, don't let people suspect you. Otherwise, you will be the one whose reputation will be ruined. Do you understand, dear?" "I understand." Replying seemed to have used up all of a girl's remaining strength. Girl was almost desperate and helplessly watched Teacher Isabel leave quietly. Dear raised his eyes and looked around. Perhaps he should be glad that most of the students were temporarily out because of the parade. At this time, a Freedom City Academy looked very deserted. The cross-dressing girl took a deep breath and calmed herself down. Since she couldn't hide on purpose, she could only go to some areas where students rarely went. Naturally, there were even fewer people in those areas today. She didn't mean to hide on purpose. The cross-dressing teenager thought quickly. He had already thought of a suitable place. Just like the Rose Mansion, a building with an old history, even though Freedom City had a high degree of urbanization, there were still some old buildings that were preserved. Freedom City didn't have a rich district or a slum district. However, there was a new district and an old district. Compared to the new district on the parade route, the old district was much more deserted. Everyone went to watch the fun. After all, it was a rare event. In the attic of a 3-story building, a pair of small eyes were glued to the glass, looking at the street below. The small eyes constantly revealed the desire to go out. Suddenly, a small figure entered the vision of the pair of small eyes. "Kelly is back." The owner of the small eyes jumped up and hurriedly ran down from the attic. This was a big family. All of them were children who had lost their relatives and were adopted in this place. The children were usually not allowed to go out. Sister Celine, who was in charge of this big family, was a very strict elder. Disobedient children would be locked up. Soon, the owner of the small eyes came to the back door of the house. When no one was paying attention, the owner of the small eyes quickly stood on tiptoe and twisted the lock. Soon after, a small figure ran in through the open door. "Diana. Kelly. Why are you only back now? Sister Celine came to look for me a few times, but I always said that your stomach wasn't feeling well and that you were in the washroom. Did you find anything to eat?" "No. I'm sorry." The two girls quickly discussed how to deal with the stern Sister Celine later. However, the goddess of luck did not favor these two little girls. The moment they turned around, there was already someone waiting for them at the end of the corridor. Sister Celia. The little girl named Kelly immediately lowered her head. She grabbed the hat on her head, trying to cover herself. As for the other little girl, Diana, she was at a loss and stood rooted to the ground. Other than the necessary strictness, Sister Selene was actually a rather delicate woman. Under the black robe there was a proud figure. The cross necklace on her chest was swaying. At this moment, Sister Selene walked toward the two little girls with an expressionless face. As I said, the sister's voice was rather calm. Without my permission, you are not allowed to leave this house. So, who is the mastermind and who is the accomplice this time? It's me. Kelly and Diana glanced at each other and said almost in unison. Then, it will be considered a joint crime. Sister Selene grabbed the back of the collars of the two little girls and lifted them up. Order. Everything requires order. You have destroyed the order here. No matter what the reason is, you have to be responsible for the mistake of destroying order. They did not dare to resist. They only hoped that they would not be locked up for too long. But at this moment, there was a knock on the door. Kelly raised her head subconsciously and saw the vigilance between Sister Selene's eyebrows. The sister quickly put them down and gestured for them to hide behind her. The person who knocked on the door was also the back door of the house. Historically, there were very few people who knocked on the door of this house, let alone the back door. Who is it? The sister did not choose to open the door. Instead, she asked directly through the door. May I ask if Miss Kelly is here? She left something on the way and we brought it back. Hearing the reply from outside the door, Sister Selene was startled at first. Then, she looked sharply at Kelly who was hiding behind her. The little girl opened her mouth. She recognized the owner of the voice outside the door. The big brother who scared her in the alley. How did he come here? The moment the door was opened, Sister Selene saw a man and a woman. Both of them were very clean. She frowned. You said that Kelly left something outside? That's it. The young man. Boss Luo smiled. Some food? Bread. Diana, who was hiding behind Sister Selyen, quickly shouted. She had already smelled the aroma of the bread. She was almost drooling. She put her finger on her lips. Kelly, on the other hand, seemed to have encountered something terrible and couldn't help but tremble at this moment. As expected, Sister Selene did not take the bag. Instead, she frowned and said, Although I am very grateful to you for bringing the things back, as far as I know, Kelly does not have the ability to pay for the food. Boss Luo said meaningfully, Miss Sister Selene, did you just say that she does not have the ability to pay? Sister Selene said calmly, Kelly has not reached the age of praying. She has not learned the formal prayer. Is it strange that she does not have the ability to pay? The bakery's boss gave it to her. Boss Luo smiled casually, probably because it is a discounted product that cannot be sold. Sister Celia looked at Kelly and muttered, Is it like what this mister said? Kelly, answer me. Yes. The little girl Kelly did not dare to look at the sister. She lowered her head and mumbled. Sister Selene heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at Boss Luo again and said seriously, Sir, thank you again for sending these things here. There's no doubt that we will need these materials. But there should not be lies here. Lies. Boss Luo shook his head. I think if it is a lie, the bakery's boss will not do nothing while the bag is full. We should trust the observation of adult. Sister Selene was silent. Similar things had happened before. Kelly had brought food back more than once, and each time it was bread. The bread tasted the same, so it was obviously from the same place. She did not want this to be a theft. But other than that, she could not think of any other possibility. However, as this young man said, if she did not acquiesce to it, she had underestimated the observation of adults. You please come in, Sister Selene sighed and said. The inside and outside of the house were the same. The shabbier the outer wall was, the better the inside of the house was. In the simple hall of the house, Sister Selene poured 2 cups of water for reception. At the door of the living room, besides Kelly and Diana, there were several other young faces. They hid behind the wall and peeked out to observe. Sister Celia glared at them and closed the door tightly, scaring the group of children. However, they did not disperse. Instead, They gathered in the corridor outside the door and discussed animatedly. Sister Celine shook her head and looked at Boss Luo and Miss Maid. She smiled bitterly and said, "Excuse me. Is this a welfare center?" Boss Luo asked casually. Sister Celine nodded. Boss Luo asked curiously, "If it is a welfare center, why is there only an inconspicuous signboard at the back door?" Sister Celine sat down and said helplessly, "Because we haven't gotten the license to operate the place yet. Without the official permission, I guess we can't operate the place, right? And we can't collect donations from the society?" Sister Celine nodded slightly. Boss Luo said, "There should be enough welfare centers in Freedom City to accept these children. Don't you think it's strange to insist on it?" Sister Celine kept quiet. She even looked at Boss Luo and Miss Maid with a trace of malicious intent and determination. "That's because these children have a reason not to register with the officials." Such a reply came from the living room, but it wasn't Sister Celine who answered. The voice came from the window of the living room. A figure pressed on the windowsill and jumped in, but he hooked onto a wooden plank. It was supposed to be a handsome entrance, but it turned into a flop in an instant. Sister Celine hurriedly ran over and helped the guy up. She asked with concern, "Mr. Arthaces, what happened to you? I told you not to jump through the window next time, but you always fall into it." "I, Asax, one of the most famous handsome boys in Freedom City Academy. Am I someone who cares about my reputation? You guys don't seem surprised that I'm the one who appeared?" Sister Celine helped Mr. Asax to the table. He pinched his nose and rubbed it softly. Boss Luo smiled casually. "It's probably because you've encountered a lot of strange things in the past few days, so you've adapted to the current situation." Mr. Arthas laughed bitterly. "I think it's because there's nothing that can surprise you. You know each other." Sister Celine couldn't help but open her mouth. "These two are guests of my mansion," Mr. Asax said. "Let me take care of them. Celine, you take care of the children. I've brought some ingredients over and placed them outside the window." "All right." Sister Celine hesitated for a moment before she agreed to it. After sitting down, Boss Luo explained the reason why he came back. "It's all my fault." Mr. Asax shook his head. "We've been delayed for a few days, so we haven't sent any food over. Otherwise, Kelly wouldn't have sneaked out. Fortunately, nothing happened." "Mr. Asax, you've been helping this welfare organization?" Boss Luo asked curiously. Mr. Asax said seriously, "Let me introduce myself. Other than being the owner of Rose Mansion, I'm also the director of this unofficial welfare organization." Ms. Maid said calmly, "Since the director is Mr. Asax, with your relationship with a few big shots in Freedom Capital, it shouldn't be difficult to get a business license." Mr. Asax shook his head. "I can't ask Durand for this matter. That guy is too righteous. Moreover, even the school principal can't do it." "Because of these children?" Boss Luo asked. Mr. Arthaces nodded and said, "These children, if they were outside, would most likely be called heretics. They can't activate the destiny system and can't pray in the future. The 7 capitals have the same attitude toward heretic. Perhaps only Freedom Capital is slightly more lenient, but it's not much better." "Mr. Asax, you've been taking in these children." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "Aren't you afraid that you'll be implicated? How should I put it? Although I'm a little shameless, I still have the title of the descendant of the saint's father. I don't think the men of the Public Security Department will really send me to the stake, right?" Arthaces smiled faintly. "The saint probably didn't expect to give you such a privilege," Ms. Maid said coldly. Asax smiled bitterly. "I don't know if there's such a privilege. What I know is that even the saint can't watch these children, who haven't really seen the world, get purified for no reason. If we're defined as heretics just because we can't activate the destiny system, I really can't agree with such a belief." Ms. Maid said calmly, "This is the rule set by the saint. Mr. Asax, it seems that you intend to challenge the saint's rule." Challenge? Essex met Ms. Yuye's gaze. He was still very afraid of the stern gaze of Ms. Yuye, and even his heart couldn't help trembling. His gaze seemed to be a little dazed, but he soon sobered up. Essex shook his head. There's nothing that can't be challenged. The heart of freedom shouldn't be restrained, especially the chaotic wind. It should be stopped. So, you think the saint's rule is wrong? Ms. Maid asked expressionlessly. Yes. This time, Mr. Essex didn't hesitate at all and directly answered. Then, oh my God, Ms. Yuye's gaze is so terrifying, it's so scary. In fact, Mr. Arthashes was extremely flustered. This kind of saint's rule, perhaps, has been waiting for someone to challenge it since it was set. But to Asash's surprise, Ms. Yuye finally said such a sentence. End of this chapter. Chapter 21:16. Mr. Arthashes felt that if he was a fanatic, he would have reported Kiran. Freedom City had once set off a wave of report. At that time, everyone held a book of the saint's sayings, also known as the saint's soldier. They were proud of pointing out the shortcomings of others, and they often put up posters of those who were reported in the street office for others to criticize and educate. Mr. Asash's grandfather once suffered such treatment. Although he was later rehabilitated, it always became a knot in his heart, and he died of depression in his old age. It seemed like Rose Mansion also started to go downhill after his grandfather passed away. At this time, he could only pretend that he didn't hear Miss Yuye's words. But he didn't think about another thing. He actually didn't consider that if the existence of this illegal welfare institute was known, the other party would report it to the authorities. It was quite abnormal that he could easily tell the whole story, even though the people in the Holy Light Kingdom were used to being honest. But in order to protect this illegal welfare institute, Mr. Essex had actually been dishonest for a long time. Mr. Essex, have you ever thought about why the heretics appeared? Boss Luo's question made Mr. Essex come back to his senses. This was probably one of the ultimate questions that not only him, but all the scholars in the Holy Light Kingdom wanted to know the answer to. And there were many people who worked tirelessly to study it, including his teacher, who was one of the experts in the study of heretic. On the road of faith, if you can't resist the temptation of desire, you will fall and become a heretic. Mr. Essex muttered, anger, sadness, jealousy. The saints said that all the original sins are hidden in the human heart and have never disappeared. The saint didn't say that, Miss Maid said suddenly. Her gaze made Mr. Essex break out in a cold sweat again. Mr. Essex could only smile bitterly. Well, actually, I said it. But generally, if the saint said it, more people will be convinced. Children can also fall. Boss Luo shook his head slightly. For children, before their ideas are formed, they don't care about right or wrong, good or evil. Besides, Mr. Essex, you just said that they were born with it. Essex thought for a moment and said, there's something called the sinner's bloodline. Fallen bloodline? It will be passed down to the descendant. Were these the saints? It was the punishment for sinners. Sinners and the descendants of sinners? Only after enduring enough suffering? Only then can you free yourself from the bloodline of sinners. Boss Luo asked calmly, Mr. Essex, what do you think? Me? Mr. Essex shook his head. Nothing? I'm not a saint, so it doesn't matter how much I believe it. Are you going to stay like this forever? Do you want to continue operating this welfare institute? Miss Maid asked. Mr. Essex fell silent. She said blankly, I don't know how long I can hold on if Rose Mansion is going to close down in the end. I think I'll be powerless. Mr. Essex smiled bitterly and said, actually, recently, it's been very difficult to support. If it weren't for Sister Serene, I'm afraid this place won't be able to hold on anymore. You don't know, other than taking care of the children during the day, Sister Serene has to work everywhere at night. I even want to write a book. I've even thought of the name. It'll be called Sister Selene's Struggle Diary. Boss Luo said, Sister Serene? Is she also a heretic? She's not. Mr. Asakes shook his head and said, "It's just that she hasn't been able to become a God's chosen one. Her daily prayers produce very little wish power? It's far from enough." "Even so, Sister Celine? I've never cared about the fact that the children are heretic." At this moment, Sister Celine pushed the door open and entered. She looked at them and said, "Mr. Asakes? Do you and your friends want to stay for dinner? Is there enough food?" Mr. Asakes asked in return. Sister Celine said, "Although it'll be simpler? But we can still provide the food for the guests." Mr. Asakes looked at Boss Luo with a questioning gaze. "Then I'll be bothering you." Boss Luo nodded straightforwardly. Later, under Boss Luo's instruction, Miss Maid and Sister Celine went to prepare dinner together. As for Boss Luo, he and Asakes went to repair the furniture in the orphanage. "How can I ask you to repair it together? Just treat it as a day of condolence," Boss Luo said with a smile. The capital of Freedom Academy. Dashiell chose the area for the activity. It was the washroom in the Academy library. Firstly, the library was a quiet place. Most of the students were focused on their studies and wouldn't pay attention to the people around them. Secondly, the Academy had suspended classes for the Holy Maiden ceremony, so there were basically no students in the library. Lastly, the library was right next to the office building of the Academy's teachers, so the possibility of meeting students he knew was even lower. However, it wasn't a good idea to hide here. The cross-dressing young man had a feeling that Teacher Isabel was observing him from somewhere. That woman was always keen on doing bold things. Why did I agree to it? Sitting on the toilet, the cross-dressing young man covered his face with his hands. He didn't understand why Teacher Isabel would take a fancy to him. Before Dashiell entered the academy, he didn't know Teacher Isabel. He and Remia came from a remote village, so how could they know a teacher from the capital of Freedom Academy? It was just a hurried meeting on the occasion of welcoming the new students. Although Teacher Isabel's charm as a mature woman had conquered the students' attention almost instantly, but Dahir had already regretted his impulsive hormones on the night he entered the school as a new student. "You used a lot of tissues, young man." He still remembered the first thing Teacher Isabel said when she suddenly appeared in front of him that night. He was so embarrassed that he wanted to cover his head with the quilt. "I can't stay here any longer. If Teacher Isabel knows about this, she will definitely find another way to make things difficult for me." The cross-dressing young man could only open the door quietly. While cross-dressing, the young man hesitated whether he should go to the men's or women's washroom. Then, he resolutely chose the men's washroom. Fortunately, no one was in the men's washroom or the women's washroom. Dashiell heaved a sigh of relief. He lowered his head and hurriedly walked out. In an instant, the young man smelled the fragrance of flowers, followed by a soft touch. It was obvious that the young man had bumped into someone. It was a woman. I'm sorry." The young man quickly apologized. He pinched his throat to make his voice sound sharper. It's okay. I was careless." Dashiell looked at the woman in front of him, or rather the girl. She should be older than him. She should be a senior. She was wearing casual clothes and didn't wear a student badge. Therefore, he couldn't tell which year she was in. "You're injured," Dashiell shouted in a low voice. It turned out that the girl had bruised her elbow after she was knocked down. "It's okay." The girl shook her head. "It's just a small matter." "Hey you?" Dashiell saw that the girl was looking at him in a daze. He subconsciously pressed the wig on his head with both hands. What happened to me?" "So cute." The girl's eyes lit up slightly. She muttered to herself, as expected of the City of Freedom Academy, "Is there a necessary connection?" Dashiell was stunned. He didn't know whether to feel happy or embarrassed. He mumbled a thank you. Seeing that the girl really didn't care about the bruise, he wanted to leave. He felt that he would be exposed sooner or later. He didn't want to see a post about him being a cross-dresser on the Academy's BBS tomorrow. Maybe in the evening. Wait, can you do me a favor? The girl suddenly shouted. I don't know the way here. I want to look around. Can you be my guide? Dashiell instantly became vigilant. Isn't this girl a student of the academy? How can it be so coincidental? Could it be? Is this girl sent by Instructor Isabel? She knew that I was hiding and didn't do my job well. That's why she sent someone to supervise me. Otherwise, what's the point of being a guide? Should I refuse? I'm afraid not. I can only accept it. Where do you want to go? Dashiell heaved a sigh of relief. However, he couldn't show his reluctance on his face. Are you really willing to be my guide? The girl was pleasantly surprised. I didn't expect that you would agree. That's great. Instructor Isabel, this extra you found is not good enough. Has he not been trained before? It's a pleasure to help others. The cross-dressing young man smiled. You haven't told me where you want to go yet. I heard that there's a big rose garden on the campus. Can I go and have a look? The girl said hurriedly. Dashiell frowned. The rose garden is the exclusive place of the principal. Students are usually not allowed to enter it. However, you can look around outside. Well, let's look around outside. The girl nodded. By the way, what's your name? Daphne, what about you? Kara Lily. The girl showed a bright smile. Whoosh! The girls were sitting in the resting area, and their clothes were hanging everywhere. These were the clothes that the Academy provided for free during the parade. They were retro and heavy. After all, they were provided for free. Most of them were antique equipment. It was said that some of them were left by the candidates of the Holy Maiden dozens of years ago. Even though they were outdated, they were free and fragrant, except that they would sweat easily after wearing them. Phew! I can't take it anymore. I don't want to stand on the parade anymore. I've been standing for a whole day. I feel like my legs have been toyed with for a year. A girl rubbed her calf at this time and complained. It would be great if someone could sponsor our exclusive float. 4 or 5 people squeezing into a float is indeed a little. Another girl sighed. By the way, Remia, I don't see your brother Dashiell. Doesn't he like to stay by your side and protect you? My brother helped me get the clothes for the parade today. That's why he didn't come. I wish I had such a good brother. The girl was secretly delighted by her envy. Remia stuck out her tongue and said, Hurry up and put on your clothes. We only have 20 minutes to rest. Don't worry. We're just here to make up the numbers. A girl waved her hand and said, In the past, only the best among the freshmen were qualified to participate, but it was only to gain some experience in advance. There has never been a freshman who became a holy maiden, let alone this time. This isn't a reason not to work hard, Remia thought. But she didn't say it out loud. Dashiell said that when there were many people, it was best not to express a different opinion. It was enough to keep it in one's heart. Ladies, are you ready? A man's voice came from outside the lounge. I know you're not dressed yet. Hurry up and tidy yourselves up. An important person is here to visit you. The girls in the lounge were startled. Then, they ran away in a flurry. After a short while, an old man with white eyeshadow appeared in front of the Holy Maiden Reserves under the protection of some people who were dressed in special uniforms and looked like soldiers. As you can see, this is the president of the City of Dawn, Mr. Ballum. The teacher in charge of leading Remia and the other girls' flower carriages introduced the old man's identity solemnly. The young girls instantly became cautious. The president of the City of Dawn was indeed an important figure, and he was a very, very important figure. It could be said that he was the person with the highest authority under the saint. The teacher leading the team said, Mr. Ballum is here to visit the Holy Maiden Reserves. He also brought some gift. Hurry up and thank Mr. Ballum. The 2 men in uniforms behind President Ballum walked out with some gift. There were some drinks, pastries, and food like cakes. The girls had been standing for a whole day and were starving. They thanked the president sincerely. I really like the Holy Maiden ceremony in the City of Freedom. President Ballum smiled and said, "If it's possible, I hope to hold a similar ceremony in the City of Dawn. Girls, no matter what the result is, I hope you can accept my invitation and come to the City of Dawn as guests. I'll pay for all your expenses and communicate with the City of Freedom Academy." The girls stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. The teacher leading the group replied tactfully, "It's their honor, Mr. Ballum. As for the matter of being a guest, I'll definitely discuss it with the headmaster when I return." "Then, I won't disturb you anymore." President Ballum smiled and said, "I still have to go and greet the other girls. Enjoy the food. These are all specialties from the City of Dawn and they taste good." "We will." The teacher in charge nodded with a smile. This was just a small interlude. The president of the City of Dawn came and left quickly. It was as if this was just an image job. The teacher in charge shook his head lightly. He couldn't understand why the president of one of the 7 capitals would do such a thing at such a critical time. Moreover, he was in the City of Freedom. Idle? "Teacher, okay, let's rest for another 10 minutes. Seeing the girls' expectant gazes, the teacher in charge said helplessly, "Girls, don't overeat." "Yay. I want to eat this. It looks delicious." Chapter 21:17. Das Hun began to suspect that Lily wasn't sent by Ms. Isabel to supervise him. She was really unfamiliar with the City of Freedom Academy. Was she really not a student of the academy? Lily, how did you get in? Das Hun couldn't help but ask curiously. Although the atmosphere of the entire school was quite free, the necessary security still existed. In theory, it was generally difficult for outsiders to pass the inspection and truly enter the school. "Someone invited me to visit." Lily thought for a while and said, "But that person is busy now, so he asked me to walk around. Then I met you, Daphne." The cross-dressing young man was still not used to the name Daphne. He thought for a while and said, "You've seen the garden, the fountain, and the memorial hall of the Holy Maiden. Do you have any other places you want to go?" "I still want to." Lily suddenly shook her head and said, "I'm afraid I can only wait for the next time. Someone is coming to pick me up." "Someone?" The cross-dressing young man followed Lily's gaze and saw a young man standing in the corridor not far away. "Thank you, Daphne, for accompanying me for so long." Lily warmly said goodbye to Das Hun and then ran directly to the young man in the corridor. Das Hun was relieved. At least, he didn't have to continue this activity that would expose his true gender. However, that young man just now seemed to be the principal's secretary, Mr. Levis? Das Hun couldn't help but think. So, Lily was invited to the academy by Mr. Levis. Where did Lily come from? The cross-dressing young man quickly shook his head. No matter where Lily came from, it didn't have much to do with him. He couldn't even take care of himself now. He would have to wear this for at least a few more hours. This time, where should I use the bathroom? On the way to the principal's office. Do you know that person just now? Levis suddenly asked. Mr. Levis, are you talking about Daphne? Daphne? LeVar subconsciously frowned, as if he was thinking about something. What grade is he in? I didn't ask you. Lily shook her head, then stuck out her tongue and said, I forgot to ask. Am I not supposed to interact with the students in the academy? No. LeVar shook his head and said calmly, It doesn't matter who you interact with now. I'm just unfamiliar with the name Daphne. There are so many students in the academy. It's normal that you haven't heard of some of their names, Mr. LeVar. LeVar merely hummed in agreement. The truth was that this was not normal. LeVar's head was filled with the personal information of all the students in the academy. It wasn't that there weren't any female students named Daphne, it was just that the female student named Daphne didn't match up with the girl from before. By the way, do you have time to see me now? Lily thought for a moment and asked, When we came here, you told me that the principal was having a meeting with the board of directors. Is it over? Overall, it's endless. LeVar said calmly. In fact, it doesn't have any substantial effect on what's happening now. But this tug-of-war is necessary. I feel like I don't have enough brains. LeVar waved his hand. Miss Kay or Lily? Why did you come out like this? Won't Mr. Essex ask about it? Boss went out at noon and said that he would be back very late. Kay or Lily said directly. Anyway, there isn't much business in the mansion. So I sneaked out. Then, there's no one in the mansion now? LeVar asked suddenly. How can it be? Kay or Lily said, when I went out, I asked Mr. Bertrand and Lady Nan to guard the door. LeVar said expressionlessly, theoretically those two are strangers. I have to say, Miss Kay or Lily, you are so generous. There shouldn't be any problem, right? Kay or Lily said subconsciously, they aren't bad people? Besides, there won't be any bad people in the Holy Light Kingdom. We're here. LeVar stopped and looked at Kay or Lily. He thought for a while and said, Miss Kay or Lily? What if the principal wants to advise you to do something? I think it's better for you to refuse directly. Why? Kay or Lily hesitated. Is it necessary? It's just my personal suggestion. LeVar said calmly. It's not necessarily a suggestion to be accepted. It depends on what you think. Okay, please come in. LeVar opened the door. The huge office of the principal was like a small greenhouse, and the roses were in full bloom. The roses were even more splendid than the ones in Rose Mansion's garden. The principal was sitting in front of the 3-meter-long desk with his chin in his hands, looking at Kay or Lily coming in. The principal even wore a pair of flat glasses today. The lenses of the glasses were glowing. The door closed softly. Kay or Lily subconsciously looked back. She saw that Mr. LeVar didn't follow her in. This maid of Rose Mansion couldn't help but feel nervous. How is it? Do you like my campus? Kay or Lily? The principal used a magnetic voice to ask with a chuckle, do you feel that it's much better than Assash's broken place? Of course. It can't be compared to the school. Kay or Lily shook her head and said, it's just that Rose Mansion isn't broken at all. It's a place that can give me warmth, Mr. Principal. Sorry, I didn't mean to belittle Rose Mansion. The principal smiled. You see, no matter how hard I tried and how many rose seeds I found from all over the 7 capitals, I still couldn't grow flowers with the same quality as Rose Mansion. In this regard, I can't compare to Essex. Kay or Lily bitterly smiled. If Boss Essex heard this, he would probably think that the principal is saying that he's just a gardener who doesn't know how to do anything other than grow flowers. He would think so. The principal smiled again. Arthaces, you've always known what I'm thinking. You've been like that since the beginning. The atmosphere gradually calmed down because of Mr. Assash's question. Kay or Lily's slightly nervous expression also began to become natural. But soon, Kay or Lily's spirit became highly nervous. The principal narrowed his eyes and said, Kay or Lily, do you want to participate in the Holy Maiden ceremony this time? What did you say? The maid couldn't react at all. The principal casually said, during the parade just now, 2 Holy Maiden Reserve floats collided. Although the 2 candidates didn't get too badly injured, it's still inconvenient for them to move around. So, there are 2 empty spots for the ceremony. One of the spots has already been chosen, so there's only 1 spot left. I think you're quite suitable. How could she be suitable? Even if there's only 1 spot left, shouldn't she be chosen from the other Holy Maiden Reserve who didn't participate? Kay or Lily's eyes widened. Clearly, the principal's words were unbelievable. What, you don't want to? Kay or Lily clenched her teeth. Principal, please don't joke with me. I'm not a student of the academy. If I say you are, who dares to say otherwise? The principal smiled casually. As long as you sign this application, from now on, you're an official student of the City of Freedom Academy. Moreover, you're also a transfer student of the Holy Maiden class. You're serious? Kaer Lily looked at him in disbelief. The principal smiled. When you stand on the stage of the Holy Maiden ceremony, you'll know that I'm not joking. Kaer Lily felt like her brain wasn't enough. She said in a daze, Why are you giving me this chance? Is it because of Boss Assake's? The conflict between me and Assake's is deeper than the feelings we developed when we grew up together. The principal shrugged. In my opinion, it's more like an ill-fated relationship. I won't casually open the back door for that guy. As for why I chose you, he looked at Kaer Lily and slowly said, The reason is because you're a transfer student. There's no one standing behind you. I don't quite understand, the principal said. The City of Freedom Academy is a very large system. In the long process of development, many capable people joined, and they gradually evolved into people with real power who can influence the decisions of the academy. You know, when a group of outstanding people gather together, it's hard to have a unified opinion. But, what does this have to do with me participating in the Holy Maiden ceremony? The decision of the academy isn't decided by one person's words. Because of different viewpoints, it's often accompanied by fierce argument. The principal smiled and said, Of course, we're not hooligans. We won't fight at the meeting table. However, the efficiency of endless arguments is very low. So, the board needs a more efficient solution through the Holy Maiden ceremony. Kaer Lily seemed to understand. The principal said, Behind every Holy Maiden candidate who participates in the ceremony, there will be a corresponding person with real power. The board of directors will be divided according to the final results of the ceremony. You want me to represent you? I don't need you to represent me. The principal shook his head. You only need to represent yourself. Who you want to represent will be decided based on your final results at the ceremony. I still don't quite understand, the principal said. It's fine. I'll give you one night to think about it. If it's really hard for you to decide, let's change the way we look at it. Then, take it as me asking you to participate in the Holy Maiden ceremony. In return, I'll enroll you in the academy and waive all your school fees. What do you think? Don't rush to answer me. The principal smiled. Think about it carefully. Of course, if you're really hesitant, you can discuss it with Assake. Also, even if you don't agree, it's fine. It won't affect my relationship with the Rose Mansion. Then okay. Kaer Lily nodded. The principal nodded in satisfaction and called Laval. Then, I'll have to trouble you to send Miss Kaer Lily back, Laval. Okay. Miss Kaer Lily, this way please. Oh, the glue seems to be used up. Mr. Assake shook his head helplessly. He was sweating profusely while fixing a leak in the room. Boss Luo was helping him. I'll go buy some, Boss Luo suggested. Assake shook his head. No need. I remember there should be some in the tool room on the 3rd floor. Can you help me get some? Of course. It's in the room at the end of the corridor on the 3rd floor. It shouldn't be locked. It should be easy to find. Following Mr. Assash's instructions, Boss Luo quickly came to the tool room. He reached for the door lock but didn't open it immediately. Soon, Boss Luo reached for the door lock of the next room. He opened the door of another room connected to the tool room. This was one of the dormitories of this welfare institution. In the dormitory, a white-clothed youth was standing by the window. Your Excellency Archangel, we meet again. Boss Luo smiled and greeted him. The white-clothed youth nodded slightly. I want to talk to you alone. At this moment, Miss May didn't even notice the arrival of the white-clothed youth. As the Archangel who ruled all the angels in the heavenly kingdom and the Son of Light in the heavenly kingdom, the white-clothed youth had such strength. But he couldn't hide for too long. Even a slightly strong wave would break his concealment. About the judges of the Holy Maiden ceremony? Boss Luo asked casually. The white-clothed youth shook his head and said seriously, It's about the Dong Remy village. Boss Luo said indifferently, I don't know what your Excellency Archangel wants to ask. The white-clothed youth thought for a while and said, Did Your Excellency break the statue I left in the underground lake? I'm really sorry. Sure enough. The white-clothed youth seemed relieved and nodded. Once the Dong Remy village incident was exposed, with Yu Ye's character, you have enough reason to be hated. I have nothing to say. Even if some of your origin was erased, you can only blame yourself. Your Excellency Archangel, Boss Luo suddenly said, you may have misunderstood. Misunderstood? The white-clothed youth couldn't help but frown. Misunderstood what? The disappearance of your origin has nothing to do with me, Boss Luo said indifferently, because if I really hated Your Excellency Archangel, I'm afraid you would have ceased to exist. The white-clothed youth's pupils suddenly contracted. Boss Luo said expressionlessly, if it was just a warning, I would have given it. Instantly, the white-clothed youth's expression changed slightly, and he blurted out, at that time, the saint's soul was destroyed because of you, Boss Luo said coldly. Since it's a private conversation, I'll say something that's only between you and me. The white-clothed youth said calmly, what is it? Boss Luo's eyes instantly emitted the light of chaos. Since I stepped into Dong Remy village, I've been suppressing a strange emotion. I'm still looking for a reason that makes me feel that the entire kingdom of heaven doesn't need to exist. The white-clothed youth's heart pounded violently. Under the gaze of the chaotic light, he felt suffocated as if he had mistakenly entered the deepest part of the dimensional void. Do you know? Boss Luo said softly, I only need a thought to make the saint light disappear from all the worlds. Impossible! A roar from the depths of his soul. After conquering tens of thousands of worlds, this was the first time in his life that he lost his composure. Faith, take away. In the roar, a finger snap sounded. The saint light on the white-clothed youth's body dimmed completely. All of his power had been sucked away. Before he could think about it, he found himself standing on the street of Freedom City when he regained his senses. On the street, people were cheering for the Saint Girl Reserve on the parade float. People walked past him. People also squeezed past him. People even knocked him away easily, and he fell to the ground. From now on, all of your legends will disappear temporarily. Your Excellency Archangel. The only thing he could hear was Boss Luo's words that covered all the bustling noises. Chapter 21:18. Even though he was pushed to the ground by the pedestrians on the street, the young man in white did not panic at all. As the propagator of the holy light and the commander of the kingdom of heaven's conquest of the myriad worlds, he had countless legends about him and had seen a lot of storms. He stood up silently and patted off the dust on his body. His eyes were cold and calm as he sized up everything around him. Is this an illusion or? He analyzed and felt, even the movement of the air did not escape his eyes. However, this instinctive and clear perception of the surrounding environment was now incomparably sluggish. The young man in white frowned. He felt like he was covered in a thick layer of membrane, isolating him from the world. The pedestrians on the street were still the same, and the voices were still loud. People were coming and going, but he had been standing on the spot for a long time. The supreme order, the authority of the kingdom of holy light that he had activated countless times also did not respond. After a few more attempts, the young man in white stopped his meaningless actions. He was still calm. He instinctively did not believe that everything he had was taken away from him, and it was taken away in a split second. The legend is gone? The young man in white muttered, My legend will not disappear. Even if only one child knows of my existence, I will still return. He slowly heaved a sigh of relief and looked at the saint's residence high up in Freedom City. Instinctively, the young man in white had a thought. However, he did not turn into light and leave as usual. He was still standing on the spot. The young man in white frowned. He remained silent. After a moment of silence, he chose to walk. Don't panic. Everyone gathered in a large, simple house. Dinner was ready. The children sat down at a big dining table in an orderly manner under Sister Celian's command. Tonight we have 2 guests. Sister Celian introduced the guests to the children of the Welfare Institute. Sister Celia was introducing the guests of the orphanage to the children. There were far more children here than they had imagined. Other than Kelly and Diana, who they had already met, there were 13 other children. The oldest among them was around 14 or 15 years old, and the youngest was around 5 years old. Let us be thankful for tonight's dinner. Miss Nunn concluded and took the lead in praying with her hands clasped together. Looking at the children praying attentively in front of the food, Miss Maid leaned towards Boss Luo and whispered, "Master, just now your HP dropped rapidly." Boss Luo knew that he couldn't hide it. Of course, he didn't intend to hide it. Therefore, as a maid who could manage part of his time, it was easy for her to detect it. "I bought some expensive items," Boss Luo smiled and said casually. "Also, I haven't reached the warning line yet." Miss Maid suddenly showed a puzzled look. However, he soon returned to the arena, although the master's time was evaporating quite rapidly. But it wasn't the limit. Was it really as master had said? Still at the safe level. The true limit of operation? Only when the owner reversed time and met the previous owner in the past. However, to require the master's time to drop to such an extent to do something? Obviously, it wasn't casual. While she was deep in thought under the table, Boss Luo quietly grabbed Miss Maid's hand. Boss Luo blinked and smiled. "It's disrespectful to the host to be absent-minded during the meal." "Sorry for my rudeness." Miss Maid nodded slightly. At this time, the nuns and the children had finished praying before the meal. So, under the children's expectant eyes, Mr. Asakes picked up the spoon and tapped on the cup lightly. He smiled and said, "You can start eating, children." "Stop. This place is not open to the public." In front of the door of the saint's residence, the guard's loud voice sounded in the ears of the young man in white. The young man in white couldn't help but frown. He was used to being unscrupulous and free in the Holy Light Kingdom. He couldn't adapt for a moment. But he did lose the ability to manifest the holy light. Mortals couldn't just look at him directly, they could even touch him easily. His years of cultivation didn't make him angry in this situation. Facing the guard's obstruction, the young man in white said indifferently, "I'm here to look for someone. Please inform Jarabel. Mir wants to see her." Mir? The guard was stunned subconsciously. Seeing the guard's expression at this time, the young man in white thought of something. "Have you heard of my name?" The guard shook his head directly. "No. But you want to see Miss Angel Jarabel?" The young man in white nodded calmly. "Wait a moment," the guard said quickly. This was due to the general good relationship between humans in the Holy Light Kingdom, especially those who worked in the saint's residence, which was like a holy place. Their moral character was naturally more noble. They wouldn't make things difficult for anyone and would even try to respond to reasonable requests. The white-clothed youth patiently waited for a moment, and the gate guard who went to report quickly returned. Moreover, he wasn't the only one. There was also a beautiful woman in the night, who was as beautiful as the bright moon. She also slowly walked over. This woman was none other than Angel Grab. In front of the door of the saint's residence, the young man in white stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking extraordinary. Seeing Angel Jarabel, the young man in white seemed to have a touch of relief on his face. "Miss Angel, this is the person who wants to see you," the guard said quickly at this time. Angel Jarabel glanced at the young man in white and nodded. She waved her hand and said, "Got it. I'll deal with it. Go back to your post, dedicated sir." It was an honor to be praised by an angel. The guard looked a little excited, and it was obvious that his mood hadn't calmed down. Angel Jarabel didn't care about this. She just walked slowly to the young man in white and said indifferently, "It's you who wants to see me?" The young man in white subconsciously felt something wrong, and this feeling immediately turned into uneasiness. "Who are you? Why do you know my existence?" Angel Jarabel's eyes were like torches. The guard who reported you said you called yourself you. The young man in white was silent for a while, and his throat suddenly became dry. Haven't you heard of it? Angel Jarabel shook her head and said indifferently, I won't forget any name I've heard, but I really haven't heard of this name. No matter who you are, since you know I'm here, it means that things are not very simple. Tell me your intention, strange guy. The young man in white suddenly took a step forward. Stop. The next moment, Angel Jarabel had already shouted in a low voice. At the same time, an invisible force turned into a wall, blocking the young man in white's footsteps. For the first time in his life, he was stopped by such a weak force. However, although he knew that this was only a weak holy power, it was like a fierce beast blocking the road for the young man in white at this time. He was stunned for a moment, and his mind was blank. All the doubts, uneasiness, and even the fear that he didn't want to admit after calming down all the way here burst out at this time. As if a terrible hole was torn in the depth of his soul, all the uneasiness and fear rushed out instantly, almost drowning his consciousness. How dare you? Overwhelmed by the uneasiness and fear, the young man in white lost control and shouted angrily, I'm the Grand Master who rules the heavenly kingdom. Usually, at this time, the situation would change. Usually, at this time, the entire world would be shaken by his rage. Usually, at this time, the endless holy light would suppress all resistance. Usually, at this moment, nothing happened. At this moment, Angel Jarabel opened her eyes slightly. After a moment of absent-mindedness, a trace of anger appeared on her face, and she shouted in a low voice, Sinner! Instantly, the power of the holy light forced the young man in white to kneel down. I've never heard of Angel Jarabel said with slight anger. The Grand Master who rules the heavenly kingdom is John, the disciple of the Holy Son. But who are you? With this crime of blasphemy, the flame of the holy light should purify you. This Angel Jarabel seemed to be really angry. With a wave of her hand, a materialized holy light flame appeared in her palm, and then it bounced onto the young man in white. The moment the holy light flame burned, the young man in white was afraid that this would be the first time he felt the pain of his soul being burned by the flame. After a moment of absent-mindedness, he howled fiercely because of the terrible pain that accompanied it. What happened? At this moment, a light beam descended, and then a man in coarse clothes slowly walked out of the light. Seeing this, Angel Jarabel quickly lowered her head. The man in coarse sackcloth said slowly, Jarabe, I can hear you calling for me. You should know that I'm guarding the birth of the heart of freedom with the other supreme beings of the 7 capitals. I'm sorry, Your Excellency, Angel Jarabel said in fear. I didn't mean it. It's just that this person, she glanced at the young man in white who was being burned by the holy light flame. Other than letting out a wail when he was burned by the flames, this white-clothed youth was actually enduring the pain. He was even enduring the burning of the holy light flames without uttering a single sound. At some point, he had even stood up. What a strong willpower! John. It was the hoarse voice of the young man in white. How dare you? Angel Jarabel instantly stopped. The man in coarse clothes waved his hand, signaling Angel Jarabel to be quiet. He even waved away the burning holy light flame on the young man in white. The man in the rough robes looked at the white-robed young man with a calm gaze. He thought for a moment and said, I can see endless anger, fear, pain, and hope for me in your eyes. Tell me what happened to you, poor child. What do you want me to do for you? Although the holy light flame was extinguished, the young man in white's clothes had been burned into rags. He had many burns on his body, and his handsome face looked abnormally horrifying. John, it's me. Me. The man in coarse clothes pondered and then shook his head. Tell me, how do you want me to react to this name? Even you. The young man in white looked at the man in coarse clothes in disbelief, and took 2 steps back in fear. Suddenly, he yelled, "Impossible! Everything! Be quiet!" The man in coarse clothes waved his hand. However, the young man in white didn't quiet down. He even burst into chaotic laughter and turned around without caring about the wounds on his body, staggering out of the saint's residence. Seeing the figure of the white-clothed youth stagger away, the man in coarse linen clothes revealed a trace of doubt in his eyes. "My lord, why did you let him go? We don't know where he came from, and we don't know his intentions. It's very strange," Angel Jarabel said hurriedly. The man in coarse clothes shook his head and said, "I felt pain from him. I saw a soul that needed to be saved. Perhaps it's because of the effects of the Saint fall that he's currently in a state of extreme confusion. Perhaps he doesn't even know who he is." "I'll go and catch him," Angel Jarabel said directly. "No need." The man in coarse clothes shook his head and said, "A person who is lost in his own heart's maze is the same no matter where he is. Now, I don't want to be distracted. If there's nothing important, don't call for me." After saying that, the man in coarse clothes turned into a ray of light and flew into the night sky. Angel Jarabel was stunned. She shook her head and looked at the mountain road down from the saint's residence. She could vaguely see the wretched figure and the intermittent crazy voice. She carefully recalled the name Me-er. She had never heard of it before. It was a pleasant dinner. After the meal, Mr. Asakes had to return to the Rose Mansion. He had been out for a long time. Sister Selene sent the boss of Arthakis and the other two guests out of the door. "Thank you again, Mr. Luo Yu Yi," Sister Selene said gratefully. Boss Luo smiled and said, "We are also grateful for your hospitality. I hope this place can accept more children who can't pray." Sister Selene's expression changed slightly. She instinctively looked at Asake. "Mr. Luo is not an outsider. It's fine." Mr. Asakes shook his head. Sister Selene heaved a sigh of relief and nodded, "Be careful on the road." She stood outside the door and watched the three of them disappear at the end of the street. Sister Selene heaved a sigh of relief. She still had a lot of work to do at night. The orphanage's financial situation had always been bad. She had already agreed to a part-time job selling drinks at night. She turned around and went into the house. However, the moment she turned around, she heard some strange noises behind her. She instinctively turned around and saw a figure slowly walking towards her in the dark. Sister Selene was stunned. The figure suddenly fell to the ground, and fell at the entrance of the orphanage. Sister Selene was shocked. She quickly went forward to help the person up. However, she realized that the person was a person with many burns on his body. Mister? Are you okay? How are you? ######## PS1. Thank you for Boss Wudong's cuteness. I don't have any good poses anymore. You can do it. PS2. 0/1, PS3, as usual. Chapter 2119. Mister? With Sister Selene's call, the heavily injured person opened his eyes slightly with difficulty. After the heavily injured person woke up, he immediately grabbed Sister Selene's arm as if he wanted to say something. "Mister, your injuries are too serious. I'll send you to the hospital now," Sister Selene said quickly. "No!" The heavily injured man struggled to speak, but he was still grabbing Sister Selene's arm tightly, as if he had more words to say, but in the end, all he managed to utter was a single word: "Hide." The severely injured man fainted again. Sister Selene could not help but open her mouth. She subconsciously looked around. Everyone had gone to participate in the patrol of the carnival at night. The surroundings were very quiet. There was no one around. "Look over here. We must find him." A few voices were rapidly moving through the night. Their steps were extremely fast. However, they did not seem to have found what they were looking for. They had stopped at an empty place. One of them squatted down and wiped the floor with his hand. He frowned and said, "It's strange. Why did the traces disappear here? That guy had such a high degree of combustion. Could he have been burned to ashes? His companion said abruptly. The one who squatted down to check said, it would be best if he was burned to ashes. But that guy, forget it. Let's look for him again. Otherwise, we can't go back and report to the president. Okay. His companions quickly responded and immediately scattered, each of them heading in different directions to search for him. After a while, the curtains next to the back door of the Informal Welfare Institute were pulled open slightly. Sister Serene carefully observed the situation outside. She looked for a while and tried to keep herself calm. She even insisted that the lights in the house were off. Suddenly, one of the figures who left turned back. Sister Serene quickly covered her mouth with her hand. She saw the guy who turned back and walked around the area before leaving. Sister Serene heaved a sigh of relief. She lowered her head and looked at the heavily injured person who had been moved into the room. She couldn't help but reveal a trace of hesitation. She was afraid that she had gotten into some kind of trouble. But by the Holy Mother of God, she could not leave him to die. However, this heavily injured person isn't willing to be sent to the hospital. But if we leave him be, he probably won't last long. Sister Selene hesitated. What's more, Ms. Nunn seemed to have made up her mind. She gritted her teeth and hurriedly helped the severely injured person into the house. Then, he picked up the phone. Selene? On the other end of the phone? The person who responded was Mr. Asake. Have I safely returned to the residence? Don't worry. Are you going to work later? Mr. Asakes, I might not be able to work tonight. Ms. Nunn gripped the phone tightly. His face was a little pale as he looked at the seriously injured person lying on the chair. Hesitantly, he said, Mr. Asakes? Can you make a trip here? Something has happened. Okay, wait for me. Mr. Asakes on the other end of the phone didn't even consider it? He immediately gave an affirmative response. Ms. Nunn hurriedly said, if it's possible, please buy some wound medicine from the pharmacy on the way. It's best if it's for burns and burns. I need more. Okay, I got it. Mr. Asakes nodded. If there's anything, wait for me to come over. Then, Mr. Asakes, who had just returned to the Rose residence, reached for his coat. What happened? Boss Luo asked curiously. Someone seems to be injured at the Welfare Institute. I'll go and take a look. Mr. Asakes quickly said, what exactly happened? I'm not very sure, but it shouldn't be a big problem. I should be able to handle it. Kara Lily, is she not back yet? When I was passing by the backyard, I haven't seen Miss Colili either. Miss Maid brought the tea. Ms. Nunn said slowly. This child? She sneaked out for a whole day. Mr. Asakes shook his head. Forget it, she should be fine. She'll call me if something happens. I'll go out first. If there's anything else, wait for me to come back. With that, Mr. Asakes pushed open the door and went out. Just then, a figure walked in. It was the maid of the mansion, Miss Colili. Boss. Kara Lily was startled. She seemed to have a lot on her mind. The moment she bumped into Mr. Asakes, she said subconsciously, I have something to. Kara Lily, you take care of our guests first. Mr. Asakes said without turning his head, I have something to deal with. Don't wait for me if I come back late. Okay, don't worry. Kara Lily nodded slightly, silently watching Mr. Asakes's figure disappear. She sighed slowly, turning around and entering the house. The hall was lit up with warm lights, and they felt like they had walked into a warm world. The maid looked a little tired. Ms. Maid smiled. Ms. Kara Lily, I've made tea. Come and drink with us. I should be the one to entertain you. Kara Lily shook her head, sorry. I'll go back to my room to change my clothes. Seeing Ms. Maid go upstairs, Boss Luo and Ms. Maid looked at each other. Boss Luo suddenly smiled. It's a little quiet. The servant girl smiled sweetly. She walked to the counter in the lobby of the mansion, turned on an old gramophone placed here, and put in a disc. It was the gramophone that Nan Xiaonan complained about. It didn't exist, but no one cared about it after it appeared. By the way, Nan Xiaonan wasn't in Rose Mansion at this time. As for her whereabouts, no one seemed to know. So, I became transparent? Only Mr. Bertrand was hiding in the corner, shivering. He didn't know whether he should stay or go out. Saintus! Ms. Yu Ye's eyes seemed to be saying to him all the time, nothing. Go away? I'll go get some water for Mr. Jacques and Ms. Jean to wipe their faces. So saying, Bertrand ran out in a great hurry. Mr. Jacques didn't wake up. He probably wouldn't wake up until Bertrand sent him back to his original subworld. As for the girl Jean, who was irritable because of Holy Fall, she also didn't wake up. Maybe the dosage of sedative that Ms. Maid said was not as light as imagined? A melody sounded in the room. The power of love, her body shriveled at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, in the vision of the spiritual world, endless threads appeared in front of Nan Xiaonan's eyes. They all went to the sky above Freedom City and gathered somewhere. The place where they gathered was a dazzling light like the sun, which almost blinded Nan Xiaonan's eyes. Of course, all of this happened on the level of the soul and spirit. So, this is the key to the so-called Resurrection Day. Nan Xiaonan rubbed the bangs on her forehead and murmured to herself thoughtfully. She then said, Sir, give me 4 more servings of Invincible Level 3 Supreme Overlord Castle, and a small food box with a heat bomb. Okay. Right away. The boss shuddered when his name was called. He stared blankly at the woman who was squatting in front of his stall. She seemed to be eating poop for a while and then eating it back. After going back and forth a few times, the boss felt that today was really a magical day. But he still had to do business. Although she could eat a lot, she was indeed a generous customer. A petitioner's crystal card was thrown on the table. Ignoring the boss's reaction at this time, Nan Xiaonan rubbed her sore neck and continued to look up at the huge light ball above Freedom City. She had no choice. The boss and Miss Maid didn't bring her, and they didn't even play the sandwich game with her. So, she sneaked out herself and used her own method to see what the so-called Resurrection Day was. To put it bluntly, she was looking for business by herself. The boss didn't lack a lackey like her. Miss Maid alone could arrange everything clearly. Nan Xiaonan even felt that she couldn't find a place to be a thigh pendant. It was safer to be a worker. Miss, the Supreme Overlord Castle and the small food box you want. Just put it here. Nan Xiaonan said casually. Then, she suddenly had an idea and asked, Boss, have you been doing business here for a long time? Me? The boss paused for a second and then replied, Yes, every time before and after the Holy Maiden ceremony, I'll set up a stall here. This way, the business will be much better. Usually, I'm in my own shop, not here. Nan Xiaonan blinked her big eyes. So, boss, you must have done a lot of research on the Holy Maiden ceremony every year. Do you have any opinion on this Holy Maiden ceremony? The boss said, What opinion can I have? No matter who becomes the Holy Maiden, it will be good. These girls are all the best. Nan Xiaonan nudged the boss's arm with her elbow and smiled with squinted eyes. So many candidates have their own supporters. Boss, you must have someone you like, right? Tell me about it. Look, I've spent so much. It took me a lot of effort to save this willpower. You saved it so much, and now you're spending it for revenge? I don't have anything I like. The boss was also a talkative person. At this moment, he smiled and said, But I've done some research. As he said this, the boss suddenly looked around and then lowered his voice. There are a few popular candidates, but unfortunately, the odds are not high. It's not easy to make a move. Nan Xiaonan blinked. What did she just hear? Odds? Outside? Lady Nan instantly lowered her voice and asked in the same tone. Shh. Lower your voice. The boss quickly said, There are a lot of security officers in plain clothes patrolling nearby. Lady Nan's eyes turned at this moment and she quickly said, Boss, I've been a little short of money recently. I haven't been able to become a god's chosen one. I've been relying on the petitioner crystal card passed down by my ancestors. Sigh, but there will be a day when it will run out. According to the way you eat, indeed. The boss of the stall agreed with him. Nan Xiaonan seized the opportunity and said, "That's why. Boss, if there's a good way?" The stall owner frowned and hesitated for a moment before asking tentatively, "Let me see your Tianming identity first." Originally, Lady Nan thought that the fake destiny system installed by Miss Maid was useless. She didn't expect that it would be useful now. The fake destiny system opened immediately. After the boss saw the words "ordinary citizen" in the citizen information column, he seemed to be relieved. The boss pulled out a stool and sat down. "It's not a good introduction. It's more like gambling. Gambling. Although the City of Freedom doesn't prohibit gambling, it also doesn't recognize it as legal." "Yes, I understand. I won't speak carelessly. Don't worry," the boss said again. "You can bet with me." Nan Xiaonan opened her mouth. Could it be that this guy was still a peripheral betting dealer? Is it safe? Nan Xiaonan showed a hesitant expression. The boss lowered his voice and said, "It's safe. Why wouldn't it be safe? This bet is set up by the City of Dawn. Don't you know the City of Dawn? It's the 7 capitals with the most developed entertainment industry. And I heard that there's a big shot in the City of Dawn behind this bet. It's definitely safe." Miss Nan said casually, "I heard that the Grand President of the City of Dawn is also attending the Holy Maiden ceremony this time. Could the big shot behind the scenes be the Grand President?" "How can it be?" The boss quickly shook his head. "The President of the City of Dawn, the manager of the 7 capitals, and one of the greatest people under the Supreme. How can he do such a thing? Are you going to bet or not?" Nan Xiaonan thought for a moment and said, "Then tell me first. What are the contestants? Also, tell me the odds." The boss said, "The hottest contestant this time is Yulia from the City of Freedom Academy's Holy Maiden class. She also participated in the last competition and got 4th place. She's very popular, so she's a hot favorite to win this competition. However, the odds are very low, so there's basically no profit. What are you writing?" "I'm writing it down first. I have a bad memory, so I'll look into it later." The boss didn't mind and continued, "There's another hot favorite. She's a 2nd-year student. She got 5th place in the last competition, just below Yulia. The last time she participated, she was only a 1st-year student. She fought her way to 5th place. Don't you think she's amazing? So she's going to be Yulia's biggest opponent this time. It's just that I don't know why she didn't appear on the parade this time. How disappointing. But her popularity is still very, very high." "What's her name?" "Selin. Hashtag 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 PS. 1/1. Chapter 2120. Under the dim yellow light, Mr. Arthasheth was washing his hands in a basin. Sister Celine immediately handed him a clean towel and asked, "How is he, sir? He doesn't seem to be dead yet." Mr. Asakes thought for a moment and said, "I applied burn ointment and bandaged him. I also fed him anti-inflammatory medicine. His breathing seems to be much smoother, but it's best to send him to the hospital or the clinic. After all, I'm not a professional doctor. I've only learned a little about first aid." "I think so too," Sister Celine said hesitantly, "but before he fainted, he seemed to be very resistant to being sent to the hospital." Mr. Asakes couldn't help but frown. "You said you saw a few people chasing after him? Can you tell where they came from?" Sister Celine shook her head and said, "It's too dark, I can't see clearly. They seemed to be discussing something, but they were too soft, so I couldn't hear them. I'm afraid they might hear me. However, they don't seem to be from Freedom City. Judging from their style of dressing, they seem to be from Dawn City." "City of Dawn?" Mr. Arthashes couldn't help but be stunned. It was not that there were no people from Dawn City in Freedom City, but the truth was there were quite a number of people from Dawn City in Freedom City. Since the 7 capitals were open to each other, as long as one reached the entry standard, theoretically, one could change their household registration at will. Because of the free atmosphere in the City of Freedom, it attracted a lot of immigrants from the 7 capitals. If he still has the Dawn City style of dressing, he should be someone who just came to the City of Freedom recently. Mr. Essex had his own thoughts. But the Holy Maiden ceremony is approaching, and there are a lot of tourists coming to Freedom City. It seems like this clue is still very vague. Mr. Essex, why don't I tell the security office? Sister Serene quickly said. Mr. Essex thought for a moment and said, Don't be hasty. Even if I have to tell them, I'll be the one doing it. Besides, I want to wait until this guy wakes up before I make a decision. But don't worry. Mr. Essex waved his hand and said, Even if he wakes up, he probably won't be able to move with his injuries. I won't go back tonight. I'll watch over this guy. Sister Serene nodded hesitantly. Then I'll get you some blankets. Sigh, looks like I can't work tonight. You! Asash's boss smiled bitterly and said, It's all my fault. I can't sponsor you a parade this year, so Sister Serene shook her head and said, It's fine. I didn't participate in the first place. It's just that the school has already registered my name. Right, you have been here for so long, but you haven't had a drink yet. I'll go get you a glass of water. This was an excuse to temporarily leave and end the topic. Mr. Essex knew what was going on, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded slightly. After Sister Serene left, Mr. Essex had time to carefully look at the seriously injured person. When he arrived at the orphanage, he was busy dealing with this person's wounds and didn't have time to examine him carefully. When he came, Mr. Essex didn't hear any rumors of a fire. But how did this person get burned to such a state? He looked at some of the items on the seriously injured person. Most of them were burned black, and there was basically no useful information. This is a paper box that wasn't completely burned. It was a box of matches. Francie. Grand. Francie Hotel? Mr. Essex frowned. This hotel, isn't it? He wasn't a person who couldn't bear pain. On the contrary, the pain of being burned by the holy flame was far less serious than the injury he suffered during the battle with the Hell Lord. What he couldn't bear was forgetting his name. If his mind wasn't strong enough, he wouldn't have been able to survive until today. After leaving the saint's residence, he quickly woke up from his chaotic mental state. He had to admit that the disappearance of the legend was far beyond what he could bear. At this moment, he was like a homeless man sitting on the stairs beside a waterway in Freedom City. This place was quiet enough, and it was even far away from the crowd. The people were still cheering for the Saintess's float parade. It's impossible to completely erase the traces of my existence. After he calmed down, he quickly understood something. Through his contact with Angel Jarabe and John in the saint's residence, he understood the most important point. Substitution, or rather, a stolen concept. His legend was temporarily replaced by John. It was equivalent to saying that John was a double legend at this time. However, this was equally terrifying, because this substitution was a substitution on the level of cognition. It even distorted John's cognition. John wasn't just an ordinary supreme of the Holy Light Kingdom. John had 2 different levels. One was the supreme of the Holy Light Kingdom, and the other was the saint. The other was the level that could exist in the Garden of Eden in the Heavenly Kingdom. It was equivalent to half of the Holy Father, Holy Spirit, and Holy Son. To put it bluntly, John even had the ultimate authority of the Heavenly Kingdom when the Lord wasn't around. What was more terrifying was that if the distortion of cognition even reached Father, he instinctively didn't want to think about this possibility because no matter how insignificant the proof was, it would prove one thing. The new owner of the shop really had the ability to make the holy light disappear from all the worlds with just a thought. This was something that was enough to make people collapse completely, even if it was just a question. After connecting with the actual situation on this level, the white-clothed young man couldn't help but feel helpless about the current situation. He truly felt the irresistible force behind the mysterious contract that existed in the heavenly kingdom. But is this a warning or a punishment? He had to go back to the source and think about the reason for the current situation. However, at this moment, a few uninvited guests disrupted his thoughts. Of course, he was unhappy and even habitually wanted to block these disturbances. However, he obviously didn't have the power of the holy light. "We finally found you. It turns out that you ran here." A man among the uninvited guests sneered at this time. "The degree of burning is so high. You are burned to this extent, but you are still alive and kicking. It seems that your willpower is more amazing than we thought." The white-clothed young man frowned subconsciously. The moment of contact made him understand that the person these guys were looking for wasn't him, but another person who was also burned. He couldn't use his power, but he didn't want to be disturbed at this time, especially these creatures of the holy light kingdom that he had observed from a high position. "You are looking for the wrong." Before the white-clothed young man finished his words, he felt his body tremble and numb. This feeling was like being struck by lightning on Mount Olympus. He instantly lost control of his body and collapsed on the ground. He only had time to see that one of the uninvited guests was holding a taser in his hand at this time. The great Lord of the heavenly kingdom, the archangel who ruled all the angels, was knocked down by a taser. Even the extreme humiliation couldn't explain his complicated feelings at this moment. He is still awake? It seems that his willpower is really tenacious. Another burst of electric current stimulation. In the twitching of his body, the white-clothed young man clenched his teeth and held the other person's arm tightly. But under the continuous twitching of his body, the white-clothed young man finally lost consciousness. Without the legend and the holy light, his body was far more fragile than he had imagined. Phew, what a tough guy! Seeing that the man had completely fainted, the guy holding the stun baton slowly breathed a sigh of relief. If he wasn't tough, how could he run out with such a high degree of burning? Another uninvited guest said indifferently. "But this guy looks a bit different. He is burned to this extent. Isn't it normal that you can't recognize him?" The companion shook his head and said, "Okay, don't waste time. Hurry up and take this guy back." In a distant, unknown place, there was such a holy city. Today was the day of pilgrimage in the holy city. Devout believers from all over the world were now approaching the church of the holy city in a kneeling manner. The believers were calling the names of omnipotence, righteousness, majesty, holiness, faithfulness, compassion, justice, and the unique in their hearts. At this moment, the entire holy city seemed to be shrouded in a layer of hazy light. Even the space seemed to be vaguely chanting the gospel. Faith is really a good thing. At this moment, on a mountain peak outside the holy city, someone was sitting on a big rock at the end of the mountain peak. It was an old man with a decaying aura all over his body. His age was even beyond the limit of what people could imagine. Even only a few silver-white hairs stayed on the layers of his scalp. Beside the old man stood a man with black goat horns and a large number of flesh-colored tattoos on his face. At this moment, a middle-aged man with a beard and a white robe climbed up the mountain barefoot. The man quickly came to the side of the old man who was about to die. The middle-aged man in white robe first looked at the old man sitting on the rock, then looked at the man with black goat horns next to him. He frowned slightly, but his expression soon returned to normal. The man with black goat horns sneered at this moment, looking at the middle-aged man in white robe with a provocative gaze. But whether it was the middle-aged man in white robe, the man with black goat horns, or the old man who seemed to be about to die, they didn't make a sound at this moment. After a long time, the old man said slowly, "You came earlier than I thought. Among them, you're also the first to come." The middle-aged man in white robe said slowly, "You're also much older than I thought. It's also the first time I know that you can also age to this extent." The old man didn't seem to care about these sarcastic words. He even smiled and said, "Not only am I old, my life won't last for long. The current me is just a remnant." The middle-aged man in white robe couldn't help but frown. "My feeling tells me that you're not joking. I've never joked with you before. You know that." The middle-aged man in white robe was silent. After a long time, he said expressionlessly, "Why did you give up everything? You have no reason to give up." "Yes, why did you give up everything?" The old man's eyes dimmed. "I really don't have a reason to give up. But the reality is, I did give up, and it's in the most unequal way." The middle-aged man in white robe said, "What do you want to do?" "Then what about you, what do you want to do?" The old man's eyes suddenly regained a trace of light. "You came here, it's almost the same as giving up everything, giving up countless people in the world who believe in you." "I didn't give up." The middle-aged man in white robe said indifferently, "That's why I came." The old man smiled indifferently. "I just said that belief is a good thing. Enough belief can even make miracles happen, making the impossible possible. But now it seems that belief is also a bad thing. It needs to make the impossible possible, so naturally, it will force you to do the impossible. They think that you're omnipotent, unique, so you can only continue to climb to become a true omnipotent. The power of belief made you, and at the same time, dominated you." The middle-aged man in white robe didn't think so. He looked at the old man with merciful eyes. "You're waiting for someone." The middle-aged man in white robe suddenly said, "But you're not waiting for me, nor are you waiting for the others." "Who are you waiting for?" "Waiting for the person who took everything from you? He seems to be in the Holy Light Kingdom now." The old man said, "What do you think he will do in the Holy Light Kingdom?" The middle-aged man in white robe said indifferently, "No matter what he wants to do, I also trust my children. They may suffer, but they can also grow. As long as I'm here, they can't grow." "What a heartless parent." The old man smiled indifferently, then shook his head. "However, I'm not waiting for him." "Then who are you waiting for?" The old man raised his head, his eyes flickering, and said softly, "That person, his name is Famine." This was a name that the middle-aged man in white robe had never heard of. This old man in front of him had too many secrets, even if he looked so weak now. While he was pondering, the middle-aged man in white robe suddenly found an open space near the old man, and sat down on the ground casually. He didn't wait. Because there was no path for him to take, this was the end. This was the first subworld to appear since the birth of the dimensional void. "Anyway, we have to wait for someone, and we still have time," the old man suddenly suggested. "How about we play cards?" The middle-aged man in white robe didn't want to talk to the old man. Chapter 21:21. Soon, Mr. Assake's came out of the orphanage. Sister Celine was surprised, but Mr. Assake's promised that he would be back soon and asked her to prepare supper. Not long after, Mr. Athanasius arrived in front of a hotel, the Hotel Francie. He took out the box of matches from his pocket and compared it with the logo printed on the box. It was the hotel's logo. Was the guy who was seriously injured a resident of this hotel? Mr. Assakes walked to the counter with doubts in his mind. However, he was told that there were no more rooms available tonight. Due to the Holy Maiden ceremony, the hotel was fully booked. "Then I have no choice. Can I rest in the lobby?" Mr. Assakes asked casually. "No problem, sir. I'll get you a glass of water." The girl at the front desk smiled. Mr. Assakes took a newspaper from the lounge and started reading. He felt that he might be too sensitive, but his intuition told him that he might find something new if he stayed. About half an hour later, Mr. Arthashes was surprised to see a group of people walking in. It was the president of the City of Dawn. Mr. Assakes frowned as he watched the man with white eyeshadow walk into the elevator under the protection of a group of guards. So, this is where the president is staying? Sister Celine said that the people who followed the seriously injured man were wearing clothes with the style of Dawn City. It shouldn't be that coincidental. Mr. Essex put down the newspaper and looked at the floor number of the elevator. He was deep in thought. Perhaps it was because of his natural sense of touch. Mr. Essex quickly found a few opportunities to sneak into the elevator when the hotel staff wasn't paying attention. However, Mr. Essex didn't expect that when he walked out of the elevator and appeared on the floor where the president was staying, he was stopped by two men. "Stop, this floor has been booked." I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong floor. I'm so sorry." Mr. Essex smiled embarrassedly and quickly walked into the elevator again. The two men blocking the way stared at the display panel of the elevator floor. The display panel stopped at a certain floor below. It didn't move for a long time before they finally retracted their gazes. What happened? Did someone come by just now? The door of one of the rooms in the front corridor suddenly opened, and a man wearing sunglasses walked out and asked in a deep voice, "Oh, it's nothing. A guy went to the wrong floor. It shouldn't be suspicious." "It doesn't matter if it's suspicious or not, be careful," the man in sunglasses said in a deep voice before walking into the room. At this time, in a beautifully decorated hotel room, a man with burns all over his body was tied up and placed on the carpet. The man's mouth was even tightly stuffed into a ball of cloth. The burned victim opened his eyes and struggled a few times, but was immediately pressed to the ground by the other two men in the room. They even yelled, "Be quiet! D*****MN guy. It took us so much effort to bring you back. You're such a troublesome guy. If you don't want to be electrocuted again, you better listen to us." Hearing that, the man didn't move. He just breathed in and out quickly, as if he was trying to calm his emotions. The man in sunglasses walked slowly to the table on the side and opened a long metal box. There was a syringe and a few small bottles in the box. "Do we still need to give him an injection?" one of the men holding the man asked in confusion. The man in sunglasses said indifferently, "It's not easy to endure until now. If we don't continue, we don't know when he'll burn again. Well, this dose is about right. This guy, since he secretly stopped taking the medicine, he must have taken it too hard." The man holding the man shook his head and said, "If that's the case, let him turn into ashes. I don't understand why the Grand President still wants to save him. If you can figure it out, then I'm working for you now." The man in sunglasses shrugged and walked over with the syringe. Seeing the syringe close to his neck, the man who had calmed down couldn't help but struggle again. The man in sunglasses didn't think so. "Look at you now. Such a beautiful face is burned to such a state. Why bother?" The burned victim struggled even more violently, but the two men who were holding him down also increased their strength. The man in sunglasses slowly pierced the needle into the neck of the man and smiled. "You've stopped the holy water for a long time, right? You may have some stress reaction after using it again, but you can even survive spontaneous combustion, so this stress reaction probably won't matter. It'll be fine soon. Welcome back to the real paradise again." The holy water was injected into the man's body little by little. After a while, a crazy convulsion began to appear on the man's body. The two men let go of him, and the man began to painfully grab his body at this time. His limbs even showed different degrees of stiffness and contraction. Stress reaction, is it that serious? I don't know how long this guy has stopped in private. I'm afraid his body has gone crazy from hunger. Oh, he fainted again. The man in sunglasses put away the tool and said indifferently, "Watch him. Wait for him to wake up and clean him up. He has such a high fever, and he still needs to spend time looking for a plastic surgeon." "Are you still going out?" his companion asked. The man in sunglasses said indifferently, "To pick someone up. The entertainment that the Grand President booked should be here soon." His companion opened his mouth, and he couldn't help but look a little nervous. He even said carefully, The Supremes are all here. Where's the Grand President? The Supremes are all focused on something right now. The man in sunglasses sneered. Currently, it's mainly the managers of the 7 capitals who are working together to deal with the Freedom City. As he spoke, the man in sunglasses looked at the phone screen. Okay, the person is here. Mr. Asakes was a little helpless. The plan to sneak into the floor where the Grand President was through the fire door failed. The fire door had long been locked. As for going through the outer wall of the hotel, there was no such thing. This wasn't a movie, and the wind outside was so strong that people would be blown away. In order to not arouse the suspicions of the Grand President's guards from the Dawn City, he could only go down the back stairs and leave. When he was about to reach the first floor, Mr. Asakes stopped. There were 2 people standing at the back stairs of the first floor. A man and a woman. The man was wearing clothes that were obviously from the City of Dawn, while the woman was wrapped up rather tightly. Not only was she wearing sunglasses, she even covered her face with a headscarf. Yes, her figure was very good. Mr. Asakes couldn't help but frown. He quickly squatted down quietly and held his breath. After a while, the fire door opened, and a man wearing sunglasses walked out. Looking at the tightly wrapped man, he smiled and said, "You're very punctual, Miss Yulia." The woman didn't say anything, only nodding slightly. The man wearing sunglasses said indifferently, "Then come with me, Mr. President. He's already waiting for you." The woman nodded obediently again, and then followed the man into the fire door. As for the man who was waiting with the masked woman, he waited for a while before continuing to walk down. It seemed like he was planning to leave through the hotel's underground parking lot. Mr. Asakes was still squatting upstairs, but his expression was a little strange. He muttered to himself, "Yulia? Isn't Yulia someone with the same name? Or—" The more he thought about it, the more Mr. Asakes felt that something was wrong. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. The change in light made Mr. Asakes raise his head subconsciously. "What, didn't you see enough just now?" It was the man who should have gone to the underground parking lot. Mr. Asakes was shocked. He hesitated for a moment, and then suddenly greeted the person in front of him. "Yo, President, you're here." As soon as he finished speaking, Mr. Asakes instantly turned around and rushed upstairs. However, this technique of creating a diversion seemed to be too crude. That person instantly grabbed Mr. Asakes's clothes and pulled him down forcefully. "What great strength!" Mr. Asakes secretly said. When he was about to resist, he suddenly felt dizzy. He was thrown over his shoulder and directly fell to the ground. Immediately after, the man pressed Mr. Asakes to the ground with a jiu-jitsu, making him unable to move. "Brother, is there a misunderstanding?" The man sneered. "Didn't you just say the president? If you want to see him, I'll take you to see him now." As he said, the man directly reached out and covered Mr. Asakes's mouth and nose. There was also a handkerchief in his palm. Mr. Asakes only felt that he inhaled a strange smell, and then he lost consciousness after a while. Even his consciousness was lost. It was already very late. The carnival that was held because of the parade had already calmed down by this time. The lights in Freedom City had dimmed a lot. However, the lobby of Rose Mansion was still brightly lit at this time. Miss Maid Lily sat in front of the counter. She held her chin and yawned. "It's already so late, why isn't Boss back yet?" "Miss Lily, do you want to continue waiting?" Boss Luo, who was sitting in the resting area, closed the book in his hand and looked at Lily. "Mr. Asakes probably won't come back tonight. Boss usually calls back if he doesn't come back for the night." Lily had a worried look on her face. "He looked a little anxious when he went out. Could something have happened to him? I just called him, but his phone was turned off." "I see." Boss Luo nodded and immediately said, "But, what kind of dangerous things could happen in Freedom City?" Lily couldn't help but be startled. That was right, what kind of danger could there be in Freedom City? Even if the door wasn't closed at night, there wouldn't be thieves. Maybe the phone just ran out of battery. Lily explained to herself. By the way, Mr. Luo, I'll go clean up your room. It's so late, you should rest. Boss Luo said casually. Yu Yi seems to have already cleaned up the room. No need to trouble you, Miss Lily. It seems like I'm the staff of the mansion? Miss Maid couldn't help but smile awkwardly at this time. She immediately stood up. Then I'll go boil some water for you. Boss Luo said at this time. Miss Lily, you seem to have something on your mind tonight. Do you want to find someone to talk to? I may be a qualified listener. Miss Maid wanted to say something but stopped. Finally, she shook her head. I'm just worried about Boss Asakes. It's nothing. Then Boss Luo nodded. Good night, Miss Lily. Good night. She watched Mr. Luo go upstairs until Mr. Luo disappeared at the end of the stairs. She opened her mouth several times but didn't say anything, although she did have an impulse to talk. However, she'd better not talk about her troubles to others. Boss Arthaces had said that he should try his best not to be an annoying child. What he could do, he should do by himself. It was still the basement of Rose Mansion. However, the circle array in the basement that was originally drawn by Miss Assman had disappeared. Miss Maid was now holding a tray and walking down slowly. She soon came to a table. On the table, something was covered with a large piece of black cloth. It seemed to be a big box. The servant girl casually lifted the black cloth that covered it. It turned out to be a cage about 1 cubic meter in size. Inside the cage, there was a small room. The cage house was like a Barbie doll's house. At this time, in the cage house, there was a little guy with a puffed-up face, as if she was sulking, the little girl with palm-sized wings. Serene, do you like this house? Miss Maid smiled and put the food on the tray into the cage. The little guy grabbed the cage and shook it for a while. You can't go out for now. Miss Maid showed an apologetic look. The little girl's cheeks puffed up even more as she sat down. Facing the food that was delivered to her, she turned her head away. Aren't you hungry? Miss Maid chuckled. I added some minced chicken to the mushroom soup. It's a pity if you don't eat it. The little girl's throat visibly gulped. She glanced over, but quickly looked away. She even raised her chin. You're reading on novelful, I'll come back tomorrow. Miss Maid said indifferently, and left the basement with the tray. After waiting for a while, the little girl looked around hesitantly. She picked up the bowl and gulped it down. But her tongue was scalded. The little girl even choked and kept coughing. Oh, I forgot to tell you, it may be scalded. Miss Maid suddenly appeared in front of the basement door and said with a smile. Seeing this, the little guy whose tongue was scalded by the hot soup suddenly quivered. Then she grabbed the bars of the cage with both hands and made a crazy output. Bad. 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 Good night, Serene. Miss Maid chuckled and left. This time, she really left. Hashtag PS. As usual, 0 to 1. Chapter 21-22. Then, see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Remia. The girls took the bus rented by the academy and returned to the dormitory. After bidding farewell to her companions one by one, Remia walked towards her room. However, when she passed by the courtyard, someone called out to her. Dasher, did you wait for me here? Seeing that it was her elder brother sitting on the bench in the courtyard, Remia immediately relaxed and excitedly walked to his side. I heard that your tour has ended. I thought that you should be back soon, so I waited for you here. Dasher rubbed Remia's head and said, I've brought back the clothes you ordered. Really? Remia's eyes lit up. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to make it in time. This is great. Here, Dasher, I have something for you too. What's this? Dasher looked at the bag in Remia's hand curiously. It's a specialty from the City of Dawn. At this moment, Remia said softly, When we were resting today, the president of the City of Dawn came to visit us. He even brought us some special desserts. I thought it would be great if Dasher could eat them, so I secretly took some. You. Dasher smiled helplessly. How can you be a saintly maiden like this? It's your first time anyway. It's just a sideshow. It doesn't matter. Remia giggled. Try it. It's really delicious. If I was a little slower, I wouldn't have been able to get it. Those guys are really good at eating. While speaking, Remia licked her lips as if she was savoring the taste of the snacks. When the young man saw this, he told Remia to keep the snacks for him, but Remia insisted. Remia said that she could share everything with Dasher because he was her family. Remia, if you see me during the saintly maiden ceremony, what will you do? The young man suddenly asked. Dasher, isn't it normal for you to support me during the saintly maiden ceremony? Remia asked in confusion. Then, she put on a serious face and said, Dasher, you don't want to see me that day. I'll be angry. I'll be angry for 2 months. I'm not talking to you. Dashio's lips moved, and then he patted Remia's shoulder gently. Done? Tired from the whole day? I should go back and rest. I still have to participate in the second round of the Holy Maiden ceremony tomorrow. He had to be in good condition? Even if you're just accompanying them, don't be the last one. All right. The young girl smiled sweetly. Remember to brush your teeth? We ate so many desserts today. The young man exhorted. He watched as Remia returned to her dormitory. Only when the lights in her room were turned on did he head to the male dormitory. However, he had just pushed open the door and entered the room. The young man's body stiffened. Inside the room, a tall figure was currently standing by the window. Dashio's lips couldn't help but tremble slightly. In the end, he lowered his head and silently closed the door of the room. The tall figure slowly turned around. It was Teacher Isabel, who was wearing a pure white suit. Teacher Isabel? Not only was he wearing a man's suit, he even tied up his long hair. He even gave off a handsome vibe. Teacher Isabel looked at the bag that Dashio put on the table and asked curiously, What's this? Pastry. I bought some, Dashio muttered. He didn't tell her that Remia left the bag for him. Oh. Teacher Isabel casually opened the bag and glanced at it. Suddenly, she narrowed her eyes. She smiled and said, If a girl eats desserts at night, she will get fat. I'm not. Teacher Isabel opened the bag with the pastry. She used her fingers to scoop up some cream and smeared it on her lip. Then, she sneakily pressed it on the young man's lips. A suffocating sweet taste. Dashio's breath stopped. His eyes widened. His body stiffened at first, then gradually softened. Finally, Teacher Isabel licked her lips and chuckled. Now you are my girl. Dahir took a deep breath and said with a trembling voice, Master Isabel, if I agree to appear in the ceremony, then in the next Holy Maiden ceremony, can you really let Remia win the championship? What? As a senior judge of the Holy Maiden ceremony, do you think I don't have the ability? Teacher Isabel said with a faint smile, Are you doubting me? I don't mean that. Dashio shook his head and sighed. I just hope you can keep your promise. I will show up at the second round tomorrow. I will show up in the way you like. I don't like the way you look now. Teacher Isabel shook her head. Dashio gritted his teeth and slowly turned around. He took out some women's clothes from the wardrobe and silently walked into the bathroom. It tastes good. Teacher Isabel chuckled. She picked up another piece of pastry and put it in her mouth. She began to eat it in small bites. As she ate, she finished all the pastry in the box. She licked her fingers as if she hadn't had enough. However, her attention was soon diverted. Dashio had walked out again as Daphne, he appeared in front of her. Mr. President booked the floor of the Francie Hotel. In the dim room, even though there was a layer of gauze between them, one could still see a graceful back view. She was sitting on President Ballum's lap, heaving up and down violently. The president casually reached out his hand and grabbed a handful of red and white capsules from the box beside him. He stuffed them into his mouth, chewed, and swallowed them. Don't you know who he is? Amidst the women's cries, the president's voice suddenly sounded. At this moment, on the other side of the curtain, the man in sunglasses shook his head. He's a resident of Freedom City. We don't have the right to access his destiny. What do you think we should do? Mr. President's voice began to sound dull. I suggest we keep him for now. There must be a way to open his destiny. The man in sunglasses thought for a moment and said, or we can take him in. This is the simplest and safest way. However, Mr. President said, do you think he came alone, or was there someone else behind him who ordered him to come? The man in sunglasses hesitated for a moment. I don't think anyone knows. Didn't Mr. Rondo come to the Dawn City before? Mr. President's voice began to sound hurried. Soon, Mr. President heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, the graceful figure had already collapsed at his feet, breathing absent-mindedly. These two fellows had been playing games on the chairs all this time. He is not an angel. He is just an ordinary person, sir, the man in sunglasses said after thinking for a moment. We are also ordinary people, aren't we? Mr. President stood up, but casually grabbed a handful of pills from the box and put them into his mouth. Ordinary people shouldn't be on par with God. Then this intruder. Use the holy water, Mr. President said casually. The man in sunglasses said, isn't it too wasteful? If you give me more time, I can take care of it. Mr. President said calmly, in my opinion, there is no such thing as wasteful. There is only the difference between useful and useless. Do you know that if a precious thing is left unused, it's useless? I understand. The man in sunglasses nodded. Mr. President said, let's end tonight's entertainment program here. Send Miss Yulia back to rest. She has to participate in the second round of the competition tomorrow. She can't be in bad condition. After that, the president of the City of Dawn walked out from behind the curtain and headed to the shower. Although he was a man who looked quite old, the president's physique was extremely robust. His steel-like muscles even made the man in sunglasses feel ashamed of his inferiority. The man in sunglasses looked at the president's back silently. He looked at the huge coiled snake tattoo on the president's back. After a moment of silence, he looked away. The sound of water splashing was heard in the shower. The man in sunglasses said calmly, Miss Yulia, are you done? The woman was dressed neatly. She slowly opened the curtain and walked out with a submissive look on her face. What a stunningly beautiful woman! The man in sunglasses thought to himself. However, he didn't look at her. The president didn't like people thinking about his things. He really didn't like it. The sound of something being knocked over woke Sister Selene up. Miss Nunn, who had dozed off halfway through, opened her eyes at this moment and saw that the heavily injured person had already fallen to the ground. The cup was knocked over and the water was all over the floor. You're awake, sir. Sister Selene quickly helped the heavily injured man up. Do you want to drink water? Wait, I'll get you another cup. Where is this place? The heavily injured man uttered in a hoarse voice. Sister Selene poured him a cup of water. The heavily injured man didn't care about anything else and quickly drank it. Are you feeling better? Sister Selene asked with concern. At the same time, she replied, this is a welfare home. Before you fainted, you fell in front of our door. Do you remember, sir? I remember now. The heavily injured man nodded slowly. Thank you, sister. Who are you? Sister Selene quickly asked. Why are you so badly burned? Why don't you go to the hospital? We can't treat your wound well here. It will definitely be inflamed. That will be troublesome. I can't go. The heavily injured man shook his head with difficulty. I'll be discovered. Then Sister Selene hesitated. Those people who chased you. The heavily injured man nodded. It was just a simple movement, but it made his face twitch in pain. Sister Selene had never seen such a terrible burn before, but this person was able to endure it. His willpower was truly astonishing. Who are you? Sister Selene asked nervously. I'm not a bad person. I won't hurt you. Don't worry. The heavily injured man said slowly. Besides, with my current state, I can't hurt anyone. Sister Selene's expression softened a little. But with your current condition, I can't guarantee that I'll send you to the hospital for your safety, sir. No. Please don't. The heavily injured man looked at Sister Selene pleadingly. But I can go to a place. Please send me to a place. Where is it? The heavily injured man said, Mr. Calvin's home. Mr. Calvin? Sister Selene was stunned and asked subconsciously, There are many people named Calvin. Who is this Calvin you're talking about? He is a famous scholar, the heavily injured man said weakly. You're from Freedom City. You should know. I know. Sister Selene instantly knew who the person was. The person named Calvin was a famous scholar. The only thing she could think of was the great scholar that even the saints treated with respect in Freedom City. Not only that, this scholar Calvin was also an honorary professor in Freedom City Academy. Also, Sister Selene heard from Mr. Essex that Scholar Calvin was his former teacher. Hurry and send me back. Too late, huh? Sir, don't pass out. How could she carry a grown man to that great scholar's home in the middle of the night? Taxi fares are expensive. I can't go to work tonight. Mr. Essex, why aren't you back yet? Did you sneak into the fish pond to fish in the middle of the night? The moment Mr. Essex regained consciousness, he rubbed the back of his head that was hurting from the fall. He felt that his head might have been injured as well. He tried to stand up and look around. However, he suddenly saw a pair of bloodshot eyes staring at him. Mr. Essex gasped, not only because of the bloodshot eyes, but also because of the appearance of the owner of the eyes. This was a guy who was wrapped in bandages from head to toe like a mummy. Moreover, even though he was wrapped in bandages, blood could be seen seeping through many parts of his body. This guy was also burned? Mr. Arthaces thought instinctively. Even though there were many possibilities for the bandages, he still subconsciously thought of the burn wounds because before he came here, Sister Selene had picked one up at the entrance of the orphanage. However, he didn't know why this guy was handcuffed to the chair. Bro, were you also caught by them? Mr. Essex quickly walked in front of the guy who was wrapped in bandages. But just as he approached, the man in front of him, who was wrapped in gauze, suddenly struggled agitatedly. With an aggressive stance, he charged at Essex. But he was restrained by handcuffs and shackles, and could only shake the chair continuously. At this moment, the door of the room opened with a click. A man wearing sunglasses walked in directly. Seeing this, Mr. Essex quickly picked up a handicraft placed on the side of the cabinet and lifted it up. However, this handicraft didn't seem to be aggressive, so Mr. Essex quickly put it down. Then, he picked up something more aggressive, an ashtray. Don't come over. I'm very accurate at hitting people. The man in sunglasses didn't say a word. He just casually took out a black pistol and loaded it. Mr. Essex showed a bright smile and slowly put the ashtray back to its original place. Finally, he wiped it clean with his sleeve. ######PS1. 1/1. PS2. Actually, it's that man who is cute. Chapter 21-23. This wasn't a matter of cowardice, this was a strategic compromise. Mr. Essex slowly raised his hands. It's good to be tactful. The man in sunglasses sneered. Then, he threw a box to Mr. Essex and motioned for him to open it. Mr. Essex could only do as he was told. After opening the box, he found that it contained a syringe used for injection. The situation was so strange that Mr. Essex couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Sure enough, following the matchbox's clues to this place was too careless. What's this? Mr. Essex's face was full of surprise. He looked at the handcuffed man wrapped in gauze and said, "Is this a painkiller for this man? You seem to have a talent for doing talk shows." The man in sunglasses said indifferently, "Unfortunately, I don't have time to watch your performance now. Now, pick it up and inject it into your body." From the beginning to the end, the man in sunglasses pointed his pistol at Mr. Asakes. The threat was always there. What is this? Mr. Asakes asked hesitantly. The man in sunglasses said coldly, "The manager of this hotel said that the rooms here have the best soundproofing in the entire Freedom City. It can even compare to a professional recording studio." What? Mr. Asakes was stunned. Then, a loud sound suddenly exploded in his ears. Mr. Arthaces instinctively retreated the floor. There was already a bullet hole in the floor. His face couldn't help but turn pale. He looked at the black muzzle pointing at him again. He didn't dare to bet that there were no bullets in the gun. He could only slowly take out the syringe from the box with fear. Where should I hit? The man in sunglasses suddenly frowned. Mr. Asakes could only put the needle on his arm, but he didn't stick it in. Instead, he quickly said, "At least give me some iodine and a rubber band. Also, is this needle clean? Wouldn't it be easy to get infected?" The man in sunglasses suddenly lowered his pistol and sighed. Mr. Asakes's expression relaxed at first, but the man in sunglasses suddenly raised his pistol again and fired 3 shots in succession. The 3 bullets actually brushed past his shoulder. They didn't penetrate his shoulder, but they did graze the skin on his shoulder. The burning sensation made Asakes quiver. He knew that there was no more space for him to hide, so he clenched his teeth and closed his eyes. He grabbed the syringe and quickly stabbed it into his shoulder. That was where she had been vaccinated when she was young. Seeing that the substance in the syringe was completely injected, the man in sunglasses lowered the pistol again and said with satisfaction, "Next, feel it well. Soon, you will feel that the whole world will become different. You will even clearly feel the reality of this world for the first time." After that, without waiting for Mr. Asakes's response, the man in sunglasses casually glanced at the guy wrapped in gauze leaning on the chair and then left the room. Mr. Asakes quickly rushed to the door. He stretched out his hand to turn the doorknob, but the door lock had been locked again. He helplessly shook his head. At this time, he pulled out the needle that was still stuck in his arm. He looked at the guy with bloodshot eyes and suddenly asked in a low voice, "Brother? Do you know what this thing is?" But the guy with bloodshot eyes? It was a grumpy brother who didn't seem to understand people's words. At this time, he was still very grumpy, or in other words, chaotic. Mr. Asakes shook his head. He walked to the sofa and sat down. At this time, he quietly loosened his hand that was holding the syringe. The needle in the syringe? He didn't know when it was bent into a right angle. Mr. Asakes straightened the needle again and threw it on the table. Now, how to escape from this place? Mr. Asakes lay on the sofa with his hands as his pillow. He looked at the ceiling of the room blankly. Suddenly, Mr. Asakes sat up and then stared at the grumpy brother who was handcuffed to the chair. Then, Mr. Asakes's arm began to shake like the grumpy brother. He even opened his mouth and began to make a low growling sound. He was adjusting the growling sound until it was almost the same as the grumpy brother. Then, he stopped. Then, Mr. Asakes began to rummage through the furniture in the room. He waited until the surrounding things were thrown down, then leaned against the corner of the wall. Facing the door of the room, he sat down. Ms. Nunn's last choice was a bicycle. There was no other way. The parade ended? People began to disperse? Currently, more than a dozen main roads were congested. She couldn't call for a taxi. She could only find a coat to cover the seriously injured man, then rode the bicycle all the way to the destination. Mr. Calvin, the grand scholar, was in the Free City. Even the children who had just entered primary school had heard of his name and deeds. Mr. Calvin's residence was not a secret. In fact, Mr. Calvin, who had always followed the ancient tradition of ascetic cultivation, would have people coming to visit him every day. Nor did Mr. Calvin refuse to see any of those who came to him. However, Mr. Calvin always liked to persuade visitors to ascetic cultivation with him. In fact, not many people could persist in following the ancient tradition of ascetic cultivation. Over time, fewer and fewer people came to visit him. However, Grand Scholar Calvin still insisted on persuading visitors. Mr. Essex told her all this, especially the saying, "Every one you catch." Mr. Essex is also an independent guy, isn't he? Sister Serene thought to herself. She could still clearly remember the way Arthursus rolled his eyes when he said those words. Although he was a famous Grand Scholar Calvin didn't live in a high-end residential area because he was an ascetic. Instead, he lived in an old building in the old town. When Miss Selyon angrily stopped the bicycle, she saw that in the shabby two-story house, only the attic was lit up. There wasn't even a doorbell. If you're looking for Mr. Calvin, you don't have to knock on the door. You can just go in. He'll always wait for you in the attic study. Remembering what Mr. Essex said, Miss Selyon hesitated for a moment. In the end, she chose to carry the seriously injured man on her back. She bent over and half carried and half dragged him into Scholar Calvin's house. The door wasn't even locked. It opened with a gentle push. "Mr. Calvin, please. Are you there?" Miss Selyon felt that she had to greet him, so she shouted a few times in front of the door. However, after a few calls, there was no response. She had no choice but to carry the seriously injured man up to the second floor and walk toward the room with the lights on. However, at that moment, Miss Selyon heard a figure screaming in pain. There was also the sound of iron chains being swung. Sister Selyon was shocked. She tried to call out again, "Mr. Calvin, are you there? I'm Mr. Assash's friend. I have something to ask you." "Mr. Calvin?" It was still the sound of screams and the sound of iron chains being swung around. In front of the attic door, Miss Selyon couldn't help but push the door open with her trembling hands. She instantly screamed in pain. Inside the room, a white-haired old man was kneeling on the ground. He was only wearing a pair of shorts. He was using the iron chain to whip his own body. Sister Selyon even saw a metal belt tightening around the old man's thigh. There were barbs on the band that pierced deep into the old man's thigh. Blood slowly flowed out. Ascetic band. In an instant, Sister Serene recalled the scientific name of the metal band. This is the so-called ancient and traditional cultivation method? However, her screams did not even move the old man. He continued to whip his body with the chain over and over again. The old man's back was filled with wounds, both old and new. Blood dripped from the wounds, making one feel uneasy. After a long time, perhaps it wasn't that long, but as she watched the old man whip himself, every second was torture for Miss Selyon. After a while, the old man finally stopped whipping himself. He put down the chain, put his hands together and faced the window, praying. Miss Selyon dared not speak, but she was so nervous that her breathing quickened. The old man finally finished praying. He held his leg and slowly stood up. He then covered himself with a long robe. "Did Essex send you here? Why did he send you here?" He looked at Miss Selyon calmly and asked. Miss Selyon opened her mouth and wanted to say something. "Who are you carrying?" The old man's eyes focused on her. Miss Selyon quickly put down the heavily injured man and said, "Mr. Calvin, this Mr. insisted on seeing you. I don't know the details, but he suddenly fainted in front of my house. He has severe burns on his body and he doesn't want to go to the hospital. It seems like someone wants to capture him." "Burns? Old man." Scholar Calvin's eyes focused slightly. He quickly walked over and lifted the clothes on the heavily injured man. He took a quick glance and then looked at Miss Selyon. "What's your name?" "Miss Selyon, mister," Miss Selyon replied softly. "Okay, Miss Selyon, please help me carry him to the desk," Scholar Calvin said. "Desk?" Sister Serene couldn't help but look at the mountainous pile of documents and books on the desk with a troubled expression. However, Scholar Calvin quickly walked to the desk and swept the things on the desk to the ground. It's done now. Carry him here. I need to prepare something. After saying that, this grand scholar of the Freedom City quickly walked out of the room. Judging from his footsteps, he did not look like an old man who had just whipped himself. His leg was still tied with the ascetic belt that pierced through his skin. Miss Celine had no choice but to carry the heavily injured man to the empty desk. After a while, Scholar Calvin came in with 2 clay pots. He stuffed one of the pots into Miss Celine's hands and said, "I'll apply it first. Then, you have to apply the ointment again. Don't take more than 5 seconds. Do you understand?" Me? Miss Celine opened her mouth and gulped. She nodded and said, I'll try my best." The 2 jars were filled with a viscous substance that had a faint smell of medicine, but it didn't seem like a regular prescription ointment. Scholar Calvin had already started applying the ointment on the heavily injured man. Miss Celine was in a difficult position, but she had no choice but to follow his instructions. Candles were lit in the study room. There was not even an electric light here. Under the dim light, the 2 of them worked together and spent more than half an hour to finish applying the ointment. Even though she did not know the origin of the ointment, when Sister Celine saw that even though the heavily injured person was unconscious, the pained expression on his face gradually eased up, and she could not help but be amazed by the ointment. "Miss Celine," Scholar Calvin called her. "Yes, I'm here." Miss Celine replied nervously. Scholar Calvin said, "Now you have 2 choices. The first one is to leave this place and forget what happened tonight. That way you won't be disturbed in your life. Then what about the second one? You stay." Scholar Calvin said slowly, "Ask me what happened, but before you ask, you have to be prepared. Some things are hard to turn back once you know them. You may even be involved in unprecedented danger because of this. I suggest that you choose the first one." The faces of the children in the orphanage flashed across Miss Celine's mind. She took a deep breath and said seriously, "I choose the first one." "Then, please go back." Calvin nodded calmly. "Remember, don't tell anyone, including Asakes." Miss Celine nodded silently. She quickly glanced at the heavily injured man, then turned around and walked out of the door. "Wait, Miss Celine?" Scholar Calvin suddenly called her. Miss Celine turned around. Scholar Calvin frowned, and the way he looked at her changed. "I remember now. Miss Celine, you're a reserve holy maiden. You were 5th in the last batch? Is there a problem?" Miss Celine asked subconsciously. "There is a problem," Scholar Calvin said calmly. "Since you're a reserve holy maiden, you don't have the first choice. I'm sorry to tell you, Miss Celine, but I'm afraid you have to stay." Miss Celine's eyes widened. "Old man, you can't be so immoral. So angry.